Call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, May 20th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. At this time, I'd please ask you to silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate to limit interruptions. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, that's roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Pittner.
Here.
Pakula. Rock.
Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance. Call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, May 20th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. At this time, I'd please ask you to silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate to limit interruptions. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, that's roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Pittner.
Item number 3 is the mayor's report, just a few events since the last call to order of the regular council meeting. We had the Chamber of Commerce Board meeting, Task Force 21. This time I'd please Councilman Janser and myself attended the Strategic Deterrence Coalition meeting last week. We had an alcohol ordinance review committee, town hall with some families on the Minot Air Force Base, and 2 events, one in town and one on Minot Air Force Base to commemorate and celebrate National Police Week. So, any questions? Number 3 is the mayor's report. Just to move on to the last proclamation we have. Call to order of the regular council meeting. We have the Chamber of Commerce Board meeting, Task Force 21. Mayor proclaims May 19th to the 25th as National Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to the sustainability events and resilient communities and Air Force Base into public health, high quality of life and well-being of the people of Minot, North Dakota. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services are provided through the dedicated efforts of the public works professionals who are engineers, managers, employees at all levels of government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, public works professionals focus on nation's transportation, water supply that are vital and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to the well-being of our citizens. And whereas high quality of life and well-being for the citizens, civic leaders, and whereas these efforts in mind to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing dedicated effort in the understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in our communities. And whereas 2024 represents the 64th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Water Association and the Canadian Public Works Association, with the theme of advancing quality of life for all. Now, therefore do I, Tom Ross, Mayor of Minot, hereby proclaim the week of May 19th to the 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week, and I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and Canadian Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies that pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees and recognize the substantial contributions they make to protect our local and national health, safety, and quality of life. Signed by Mayor Tom Ross and Michaela McWilliams. So, it's Tom. Do we want to present it?
So I'm gonna, okay.
Our professionals here, Mayor.
Want me to come down?
As the mayor's coming down, I'd just like to say a few words. So Public Works is often considered the silent arm of public safety, usually without fanfare. In 2003, President George W. Bush issued Presidential Policy Directive 8, officially recognizing public works as first responders. In 2017, the American Public Works Association Board of Directors approved the adoption of a National Public Works First Responder symbol that Jason has, that we'll take a photo here in a minute. This is used throughout North America to identify public works personnel and acknowledge their role as first responders. The symbol uses colors we all see around construction zones, barricades, cones, and barrels, serving as a reminder of these quiet professionals who work tirelessly every day to improve our community and respond to emergencies. The City of The City of Minot Public Works will hold an open house this Wednesday, 22 May, from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Public Works Building and Grounds, 1025 31st Street Southeast. So I'd just like to recognize our Public Works team. The mayor will come over. We'll take a little photo op.
Sorry, I can't see the flags.
And before we move on to the agenda, I just wanted to give Kayla a couple minutes to talk about the new software package that we're working with here. So, Kayla.
Okay, so like I said to everybody before we got in the meeting, but we're trying Civic Clerk. We presented some videos and trainings at one of the Budget Council meetings. We are having a minor issue with the voting that you guys are doing on your electronic tablets. So I will record the votes tonight. I'll work through it with Civic Plus, and hopefully by the next meeting we'll have that working. So understand that the only time we get to practice as a whole is when we're all in a public meeting, which is super fun. So just kind of work with us for the next couple meetings. We're trying to be as open and transparent as possible about the software, and we're just having a couple glitches. So understand that tonight you guys will have access to your board portal, which will give you access to all your attachments. It just isn't popping up your electronic votes. So I'll do the recording of the votes.
Thank you. Any questions of Kayla? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number 4 on the agenda, reports. City Manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before I have Dave come up to do his monthly finance report for the council and the public, entertain any questions that the council would have with regards to the remainder of the memo. It's fairly brief, this meeting.
Any questions of Harold? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll try and move through this very quickly. This is just intended to be a little bit of an update, provide some timely information for members of the council and also the public. We're going to start, since this is the first of these, we're going to have a little bit of an educational process here with the Finance 101. This is something that we dusted off from years before and updated. And then we have some revenue projections we're going to work through a little bit, and that's pretty timely with the budget process ahead of us. So the Revenue 101, we're going to talk about some sources of income. First thing we want to talk about is different types of funds. We've heard a lot of discussion with things. Probably the most common fund that we hear of is the general fund, and that is the largest and the most common fund we have. It is considered to be a governmental fund, and it differentiates from other types of funds. Included in the governmental funds is our capital projects, special revenue, debt service funds, as well as the general fund. So all of those combined are considered to be governmental funds. And what's special about these types of funds is when funding goes into those, each specific fund, if it isn't expended at the end of the year, the money generally stays in that fund. It isn't used for any other purpose. And that also applies to other funds like the enterprise funds that we'll talk about here in a minute. The biggest of the general fund includes things like general government, public safety, and streets. So enterprise funds are things that the city operates like a business. So including water, sewer, storm sewer, sanitation, cemetery, parking authority, airport, and also the parking ramps. So another thing that differentiates these is we use a different type of accounting method, excuse me, for enterprise funds versus governmental funds. So the way we account for things in the governmental funds is on a modified accrual basis. Enterprise funds use full accrual accounting just like a normal business would. All right, this just explains some of the sources of revenues for governmental funds and enterprise funds. So governmental funds are primarily property taxes, state aid, sales tax, fees that we charge for services, licenses and permits, grants, fines, and of course, interest earnings. Uses of those types of funds: public safety, library, assessor's office, human resources, finance, IT, other administrative departments, traffic and street, community development and engineering, property maintenance. Of course, city manager, city council's expenses come out of there, and city infrastructure and capital purchases. Enterprise funds, the revenues generally come from user fees, airport revenue, sanitation, cemetery fees, special assessments, interest earnings. Uses, again, personnel, providing the services that we're charging a fee for, infrastructure, maintenance of the infrastructure, and doing the billing for those services as well. So this graphic shows some of the differences. So looking at governmental activities, the bulk of governmental activities are funded by taxes of one type or another. So that includes property taxes, sales taxes, revenues from the state that are derived from sales taxes. And when you contrast that to the enterprise funds on the right, the main source of funding for the enterprise funds is charges for services and then operating and capital grants. So this is a chart that we've updated recently, just showing the property tax rate and the collections, and this will become important as we work through the revenue estimates leading up to this budget. And the reason I wanted to show this graphic here is, you know, it looks like when you look at the rate, we've been fairly level or actually declined a little bit on the rate. And the amount that we've collected has gone up just slightly because this is collected tax dollars, not levied tax dollars. And that's an important distinction right now because in the last few years, we've held the levy somewhat flat and the amount that was levied has increased based on the increased assessment. And some of that is from increases in values and new construction that has come on board. What we've also seen in the last several years is our amount of delinquencies has gone up as well. So even though that rate was flat and we anticipated collecting more in property tax dollars each year, the delinquencies have gone up, so that's really kept that somewhat flat across the board in what we've actually received. Sales tax. Now, this is a little bit of a dated graphic, but I wanted to point this out just to clarify some things that we heard in the last few weeks, some of the presentations we've had, and some of the discussion surrounding NAS in the sales tax pennies. So before we reallocated any money to NAS, this is what the allocations look like before NAS came on board. So the first penny and the second penny allocations. And of course, NAS is in the second penny allocation. So when we add that 40% for NAS, the other three allocations were reduced proportionately. So instead of infrastructure receiving 40% of a penny, it's now only receiving 60% of that, so it's 24. And of course, property tax relief and flood control were also released to 18%. So some of the discussion that we've heard recently is what happens when the NAS funding goes away? Well, it goes right back to the way it was before. That 40% that's allocated to NAS does not go to any other thing. The allocations just go back to their full amount as they are in the sales tax ordinance. So I just wanted to make sure that that is clear. It looks like we have several years of funding yet to allocate towards NAS, so it's probably going to be 26 or 27 before we're able to get rid of that. But when we do, it will go back to the same allocation as it was before. So sales tax collections, this is something that you've all seen before. The bold red line there is this year's sales tax collections. January was the best month we've seen in the history of sales tax in the city, followed by 2 not so stellar months worth of collections. And when we started looking at the guidance we're given from the state and from the League of Cities on next year's revenue projections for sales tax, they're forecasting that we should be down 3.5% from the 2023 actual numbers. So we start looking at that. 2023 was a pretty good year in collections for us. So we're looking for some validation to that forecast here in these numbers. And this does not give us a warm, fuzzy feeling on keeping a level number. So we got new numbers in today for the month of April, and here's where we're at. So that helps us out a little bit. It's a very good month for April. And again, well above the 5-year average. Year to date, we're up about 17% year over year. So that looks good, but again, very volatile. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And I'm going to throw out a projection here in a little bit, but that's something that'll be a little bit fluid as we move through the budget process. This is just another graphic of sales tax collections that I've shown in some slides. When you look at this, it looks like as we move to the right in the graph, it's almost a steady increase, and it shows that sales tax continue to increase, and we shouldn't be worried about anything. We go to the next slide. If we go back a few more years, this is what the sales tax collections look like. Back in 14 and 15 were very strong. Actually, in 2014 was about the same amount as it was last year. And all of a sudden in 16, we had a sudden decline in sales tax that lasted for several years. So this is where a little bit of the, being a little nervous about throwing out an aggressive projection comes from here. Hub City Oil and Gas Funds. This is just a chart from the last few years. We looked at the director's cut from the Department of Mineral Resources, and they're projecting that production is going to stay fairly steady at about 1.1 million barrels per day. Prices have remained strong, so we're basing our production on historical numbers here, and we'll hope for the best in the upcoming year. So, right now, what we're looking at based on the state's guidance and what we're seeing for actuals, we're anticipating that we'll use a budget number of about $12.25 million per penny for sales tax revenues and $6.25 million for Hub City revenues. So this is one of the first steps in our revenue projections to develop the budget, but it's a pretty critical step for us moving forward too. All right, this is just a couple of slides from the CIP for the next 4 years. And these are some big numbers. The CIP, the total was just under $613 million in the top slide based on the different departments. The bottom slide there shows the different funding, and where that's important is if you add up all those local funding sources, it's right at about $242 million over the next 5 years for local funding on these CIP projects. Now, I'll caveat this a little bit that the water sewer has, or sanitary sewer has a big number in there for a potential need for a sewage treatment plant at some point in the future. With the permitting process that we're under right now, it looks like that may be pushed off further into the future. But another caveat here is the CIP does not include any of the funding remaining for NAS or anything to do with the police department or the rehab of the old city hall building. So there are some other costs that will come into play here, as well as what's already in the CIP. So this is just a quick exercise that we go through when we look at reserves, and we try to take our ending balance from the prior year, look at what's committed or encumbered, take our reserves, our bond covenants, and then also what is projected to be used in the current budget and we look forward and try and project a cash balance. So if you look at the very bottom corner, and I know it's pretty small, it looks like a pretty big number. There, it's about $98 million. And the problem is we just said we have about $142 million of unfunded local share for CIP in the next 5 years as well. Okay, this is just a quick slide to show some additional sources of information. A lot of these reports are published on the finance webpage. So if you go to the finance webpage, which is the top link there, all of these items have a link here. You can look at all the budgets, the annual reports, Magic Fund reports, monthly reports, quarterly, and then year-end cash balances as well. That's all I have. I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for finance? Steve?
Yeah, that was very informative, but I just didn't quite catch the state projection. What period of time and what 3% down? Could you clarify that again?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, what the state is doing is they're saying based on 2023 actual numbers, they are projecting that the 2025 revenues for sales tax will be 3.5% less than 2023 actual numbers.
Thank you. And that's for the calendar year.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? Seeing none, thank you, Dave. Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, this Planning Commission. Consider the report of the Planning Commission. 5.2, public hearing on a zoning map amendment for 301 Hillcrest Drive. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the proposed zoning map amendment to step forward. Second call for those who wish to speak in reference to item 5.2, the public hearing on the zoning map amendment. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item as recommended.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none. Do we call the roll or do we?
Did anything pop up?
I didn't see anything.
Oh, dang. I'll call the roll. Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Padragula.
Yes.
Pittner. Ross.
Yes.
Evans. Yes. Motion passed.
Moving on to item number 6, that is our consent agenda. We have 12 items on our consent agenda this evening. We've been asked to pull 2 items, item 6.8 and item 6.2.2 from the agenda. Those 2 items have been pulled. What are the wishes of the council?
Move the remaining items.
We have a motion by Lisa to move the remaining items. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Padragula. Ross. Burlingame.
Yes.
Evans. Yes. Janser.
Yes.
Moving on to item 6.2.2 was asked to be pulled by Councilman Burlingame. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Discussion. Scott?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to pull this before hopefully we pass it on, because there's been a lot of work that went into this, and I wanted to just have an opportunity to make some comments. First off, this is obviously a step towards accessibility and improving accessibility here in our city, and I want to give credit for the staff that worked on that, including the planning staff, our inspectors, our public works staff. We have been working hard to make this community more accessible, and as I always say when I talk about this, we're always looking at improvement, not perfection. That, as I said when we first brought this up, I could walk through any building and any parking lot and any business and any street and find accessibility problems. But the question is not what are the problems, but rather what can we do and what should we do to make this better. And making automatic doors goes above and beyond even the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act to make our city a little bit more accessible. Second, I'd like to give Alderwoman Evans credit for the work that she's done with our disabled roundtable discussions. She did that shortly after being elected, and that has not always been an act that was done with the most credit possible, but it has helped to magnify the voice of the disabled community and to improve accessibility. So thank you for that. And furthermore, as we move beyond this issue, I want to go back to something I said when this was first talked about, which is to encourage staff and to encourage this body to look at accessibility in as many ways as possible. Power doors are wonderful, and that was one of the comments I had as I talked to people who have mobility impairments in this community. But they said power doors don't matter if we can't continue to improve our snow removal. And furthermore, one of the other issues they wanted to make sure I bring up is the importance of elevators. And current ADA and current building code does not always require elevators, but therefore I'd ask our city to be creative and innovative in finding ways and perhaps making use of some of our economic development tax dollars moving forward to encourage and reduce the costs of elevators in 2-story and 3-story buildings. As we move into summer, which is here now, I believe, I haven't looked outside in a little bit, but you know, and we see rooftop bars open. 2 of the 3 of them in town are not wheelchair accessible. We can do better than that. Let's find ways to make our buildings accessible, understanding the fact that that is an extraordinarily expensive step for small businesses to make. But if we can leverage economic development funds to do that, I would like to see that done. So I just wanted to make those comments as we move forward on this ordinance.
Thank you, Scott. Any further comments or discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Lisa.
Thank you. So 2 weeks ago, I voted against this ordinance, not because I was in disagreement with the intent at all, but just because I felt that it maybe wasn't worded the way that I thought was easily understood. But I have spent some time looking at it, and now that and we can see a clear copy of it presented to us, I appreciate the work that has been put into it as well, and I will be voting in favor of it this evening.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Pittner, Ross,
Yes.
Evans, Janser.
Yes.
Moving on to item 6.8 on the consent, that is the capital improvement plan. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. And Lisa, you wanted this pulled.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be voting in favor of this plan as well, except I would like to offer an amendment, and my amendment would be to delete project E18, which is the Ann Street Bridge. I will make that in the form of a motion. If there's a second, I'd like to give my explanation as to why.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, now is that,
What's that?
that's an amendment,
Yes.
right? So, okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. Many times I've had concerns with spending a great deal of money on a pedestrian bridge that is parallel to a pedestrian bridge. And I still have those concerns, but at this point, after going through nearly 25 hours of budget meetings in the last week and a half, we've been told we have to make some very difficult decisions. And we know that there will be cuts in different places. Our finance director just mentioned that in the CIP, we have not set aside any money for a new police department. And I stand strongly behind the need for building or revamping a building somehow to get our police department up to the standards that should be acceptable in 2024 and beyond. And so I can't stand behind spending $8 million on a pedestrian bridge when I know that that money could be used in a different place.
Any further discussion? Paul?
Maybe a question for Lance. Lance, how many dollars are allocated to the Ann Street Bridge construction next year? Or design, or?
There's nothing.
Mr.
The first
Mayor and
allocation is 20.
Alderman Hang on. Pittner, there are no funds in 2025, but in 2026, we've allocated $950,000 towards design with a anticipated construction start in 2029, and we're allocating $7.5 million in that year.
Let me continue. What's the possibility of kicking that can down the road next year and not allocating those funds? Is that a possibility?
Certainly, I mean, the project can float ahead or behind in time,
Okay.
however you choose.
If I can continue. As far as applying for any sort of state or federal funding, you know, any grant dollars, is that possible if it's not in the CIP?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, me and my staff have been looking for federal funds the entire time this has been in the CIP. It's a tough project to try to find grant funds for just because of where it's at and some of the uncertainty around it, and then trying to meet some of the federal metrics around it. We have been talking with BNSF. They've been looking at some projects around the community that may fit some of their programs as they're applying for federal funds. So we've been reaching out to different partners who may be interested in a project like this. It's been tough. There's a lot of competing interests in federal funding right now. So we've been after it. It's just, we haven't found that yet.
And I don't disagree that it's difficult to find those funds. Is it possible to apply for funds for a project that is not in the capital improvement plan?
Yes, it's always possible.
Carrie?
So, as Lance pointed out, there is nothing allocated for this in the budget for next year. So I would suggest giving people another year to get some money, and then this body taking a vote next year when there's actually going to be action to take on the Ann Street Bridge. Right now, I feel like it's just some electioneering going on up here, and there is no money allocated. So there is no downside to the city or taxpayers of Minot to keep it in the CIP for another year.
Paul? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess that's my thoughts as well. I mean, there's no harm in leaving it in there. Is it something that we want to spend money on right now? No. Is it something we have money for right now? No. Is it something that we intend to spend money on right now? No. So again, I don't see the harm in leaving it in there and leaving it to the next body, the next council. Maybe it's a council 10 years from now that just has an earmark in the CIP as a placeholder going down in the future. I don't see a harm in that. Would it be, is it a want versus a need? Absolutely, it's a want. Like, absolutely it is. But there's nothing wrong or against connectivity. We just voted on it. We just voted on an agenda item, how we want our community to be connected for people that can't traverse across Broadway and then down Railway Avenue or under a bypass, under a walking bridge that is flooded for a portion of the year, if I'm not wrong, that goes under 3rd Street. So again, I'll vote against the amendment. I don't see any harm in leaving it in there. I don't intend on putting any funding towards it this year, next year, maybe the next 20 years, but I have no problem with it being in there because I do believe when you think about the future of this community, that project has a place. And that's why I'll vote to make sure it stays in.
Steve?
I wanted to agree with Carrie and especially with Paul. I don't think it's feasible and I wouldn't support it at the present time. But as a placeholder, which doesn't cost anybody anything at this point, I think it's worthwhile. There would be perhaps the crowning achievement in our emerald necklace along the river that we're building and planning. I think access from downtown is important to preserve, particularly as downtown grows. Again, I don't see any downside to it. Would I support it now? Of course not. Would I support it in the near future? Most likely not. But if we can come up with some money from other sources, I think it's something that will be worth considering at that time. So I will oppose the amendment. Okay.
Scott?
Lance, what I'm trying to get an ideal for as I look at this is, I agree with the conversation that's been had here. I have zero interest in any local taxpayer dollars going into this now or probably ever. That being said, how much time, would it matter to you if it's in the CIP versus not, and to how much time you and your staff are going to put into this?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Burlingame, I think it's
at some point, we have to organize our priorities. And so the way that we do that is the projects that are listed in the 2025 CIP and that council has said, these are the projects we're funding. These are the projects that myself and our staff are actively working on. The ones in 2026 that are listed and that are left in the CIP are probably the ones that are in some sort of preliminary engineering or that we're starting to get organized and put out requests for qualifications for engineering services, and we're at least starting to think about them and get them organized, because especially now with all the projects that we have going on, and we're going to talk about that later on our agenda, we're just running out of time to get some of this work organized. We have to start earlier and earlier. So what I'm hearing is it's important enough to leave in the CIP, but maybe it's not at the top of the engineering department's work pile. Which is fine, and that means we're going to keep looking for potential grant opportunities, but at the end of the day, there may come a point where we're probably going to come back to you and say, hey, we might have found an opportunity, but we don't have the horsepower internally to put a grant application together. So if you really want this, we're going to have to spend some dollars to hire a consultant to put a grant application together is probably how that's going to shake out. That's the realistically, that's how this is probably going to happen.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, Carrie.
just to be clear, though, it's not, regardless of what happened, it's not at the top of your manpower list for 2025.
That's correct.
Right. So again, it's like, it's not budgeted. You even aren't using internal resources except looking for some grants in 2025, correct?
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to follow up, first, it is not electioneering. I've had concerns about this project for a number of years. And second, in my priorities, revamping or rebuilding the police department has a much higher priority than this, and that's why I offered the amendment.
And I have a question, though, Alderman
Lisa?
Olson. How does taking out the Ann Street Bridge meet your goal? Like, there's no money. Like, I get it, we all support that, but this is not the means to it. It's not like okay, we're going to allot this money to the police department.
Well, I think that would be a step, pardon me, Mr. Mayor. I believe that this would be a step in that direction, because we have not placed the police department in the CIP, and that would be a step that needs to happen, needs to
But
take
Ann
place.
Street Bridge in there does not negate the police department. Like, there's not a finite number of projects that can be in here. There's nothing stopping this body from putting the police department into the capital improvement project. It's not a either or, it's a both and, potentially.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Again, I'm setting a priority for myself, and I think that it's representative of a priority of many residents in the city. And so I've offered the amendment. If it fails, it fails, but I felt like it was necessary to at least offer that amendment.
Okay. Any further discussion? Steve?
I wanted to thank Lisa for holding our feet to the fire. I think we will have to make some hard decisions soon, but I don't know that tonight's the night to make them. Like I said before, I feel comfortable having it in a limbo status, if you will, but I think you're right. We will be forced to choose, given our limitations, where we allocate resources, and I certainly would favor dealing with the police station issue rather than spending money on this, but the decision point isn't quite yet. So I appreciate you bringing it up, though, because we will have to decide.
Carrie?
I just have one last question. Lance, so last year, this was 5.9 million in the budget. Did every capital improvement project go up 30%?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, not every project, but what we've seen in industries, bridge projects are going through the roof because of all the federal stimulus money. So bridge projects across the board have gone up significantly in price. That's been reflected in the CIP.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we have an amendment to remove the Ann Street Bridge from the CIP. We will vote on that. Call the roll on the amendment.
Olson?
Yes.
Padragula?
I just checked no. Was that registered somewhere?
Just say no. Just say.
I will put it in there too.
No.
Pittner,
No.
Ross,
No.
Evans,
No.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
motion fails.
Moving on to the original motion to approve the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan. Is there any further discussion?
Now we're on the original motion.
We're on the original, yeah, the original motion that was originally pulled. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Padragula,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, moving on to, what? Oh, there it is.
So what are you gonna say when we actually do this live? Like, just cast your votes?
Yeah.
Moving on to item number 7, our action item, 7.1, a public hearing on the CDBG entitlement process. Mr. Plank.
Mayor Olson and members of the council, on May 7th, 2024, or 2024, the allocations were announced by HUD, and the city of Minot will receive $331,580. It's up a little more than we thought it would be. And part of the regulations, as you know, is we are required to have 2 public hearings, and tonight is the first public hearings, either in support or any comments against the CDBG entitlement process. And we will be having a second public hearing after the consolidated plan is completed in about a month. Just some statistics from the stakeholder and public information sessions. We had 2 sessions on May 7th for our area stakeholders. We had 16 attendees. 14 questionnaires were received, and Legal Aid actually handed this out to their employees and asked them to fill out the information, so that was a great assistance as well. The top 5 areas that the stakeholders identified were year-round shelters for families, women, and men, especially the low-barrier shelters. We've been hearing that over the course of a couple years. Some mental health services, childcare services, addiction services, and transportation options. Getting to and from appointments, getting to a shelter, from a shelter, those things were some challenges that the stakeholders had identified. We also had some spirited discussions about the difficulty of rental within the city, particularly if you have a low credit score or if you do have a low-level criminal history. Sometimes you can be denied housing. Even the housing affordability, the high deposits that some of the landlords require do put people at a disadvantage. A substandard housing stock for the LMI. What we found out is that the extremely low-income individuals have a higher cost burden, and so they tend to live in properties where they may have more plumbing or electrical or other types of deficiencies. That was identified from the stakeholders. And then the last thing the stakeholders identified was the limited number of qualified affordable housing developers. Not the housing, but having the developers who are willing to do the regulations to work with that. On May 8th, we held a public information session at City Hall here. 9 people signed in, a couple did not. We also had it on Facebook, thanks to our public information office, and we did have individuals attend. They agreed typically with the stakeholders. However, they did have some additional needs like financial counseling services, some life skills classes for individuals, as well as nutrition classes, and then mental health services that include finding a purpose, hope, joy, and a way to participate in change into daily life as well. And then one other area that they did identify is assisting residents who are currently living in trailer or mobile home parks to obtain land so they can have their own property. They felt that that was really important and something that we should look at as well too. So at this time, I will stand for any questions, or we do have comments from, if anybody wants to add comments.
Are there any questions of Mr. Plank?
Just a comment. I want to underscore, I mean, I know it's one of the priorities, but, you know, as all of us, you know, go to bed tonight, that Minot does not have a shelter for homeless people right now. We have a shelter for women experiencing domestic violence. We have a shelter for youth 18 and under. And even when the family shelter is finished, that is still a family shelter. Right now, if you're an individual man or an individual woman not experiencing domestic violence, there is no bed for you in this city tonight.
Correct.
And that
Mayor
will
Ross-
be that way all summer.
And Mayor Ross and Alderwoman Evans, that is something that was talked about as well. And to split up the family during a particularly stressful situation can even add more trauma to them. So that it was something they had.
But there's no place to even split them now,
True.
right? Like, yeah.
Anything else, Steve?
I was really struck by the very, very broad nature of the suggestions that were made. This thing about finding joy, happiness, and meaning in life. I'm in the mental health business.
Right.
You know, it's between that and finding land for affordable trailers and other housing. Could you give us just a very brief overview, maybe the 50,000, not the 30,000 foot level, of what CDBG is about? Because here we're presented with almost an endless range of possibilities. What's the point of CDBG?
So Mayor Ross and Alderman Padragula, the CDBG program is the Community Development Block Grant Program. It was established in 1974, so it's been around 50 years, and it was a combination of 8 different departments in the 70s, and what the main goal is to have sustainable living, sustainable communities, and opportunities for those individuals who may be of the low to moderate income individuals. So finding programs, supporting housing that can benefit these individuals so that they become a productive member or feel like they're even a more productive member of society, and get them out of that where they're stuck, and get them feeling good about themselves, or getting them the services they even need, whether it's mental health, whether it's addiction, whether it's credit counseling, to enrich their lives as well.
And this 300,000 you say was more than we expect, and thank you, that's a very good summary. This 300,000 was more, well, I guess maybe before saying that, it sounds like this is a program in a sense to help the least of us, if I could use scriptural terminology. This is for the most disadvantaged, the ones who are most struggling in our society.
Mayor Ross and Alderman Padragula, yes, you are correct. In 2023, if we had been an entitlement community, we would only have received 324,000. So it is up a little more, whether that's our population, the amount of housing, pre-1940s housing that we have in the city. HUD has 2 formulas that they use to determine the allocation. So we're blessed. Even though it's only $7,000, $8,000 more, it's more than we had before.
And the expectation is we'll be getting about this amount of money in the future.
Correct. It is an annual allocation, and it can either go up or down depending. If a community does turn it down, the money goes back into a pool. If Congress all of a sudden says, hey, we have more money, we're going to split it up, that would be great. So there are different factors that are involved with that.
And when you develop this plan as a result of the input from people, it'll come before us and we'll have a chance to debate it and sign off on it or suggest modifications.
Mayor Ross and Alderman Padragula, yes, you are correct, yes. The consolidated plan does need to be approved by the council, as well as the annual action plans that are involved with that. So Elizabeth McInerney will be back in July, and we will be presenting the consolidated plan to the council for their approval.
So it'll be part of the final budget for the city for the next year, or could be made part of it, since you won't approve the budget till September.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Padragula, the money for CDBG isn't part of our general fund. It is separate in that my salary, as well as my compliance officer and the finance, is paid out of the administrative funds from the grants.
Right. I guess just a final comment is that this is very, I mean, it's a good thing we have access to this money, whatever the exact amount is. And I think it's opening up some possibilities to fill major needs, particularly with the homeless population, that I think are absolutely critical in this community. That's the upside. The downside is that at this point we have no focus, and I think potentially this could be used for just about anything, and that worries me. And one of the decisions I think we'll have to make is, you know, what are municipal or municipally supported functions and which aren't, which are really within the realm of the county or private organizations or faith communities or the state. I want to make sure that the money isn't dissipated, and maybe squandered is too strong a term, but, you know, with all the demands we have in the human services area and the needs of people with low incomes, I think we'll have to be very, very cautious and do a very careful job in prioritizing. Like I say, some of these things sound like, you know, just pie. I don't mean to be pejorative here, but pie in the sky kinds of goals. I mean, happiness, meaning in life. I'm sorry, I don't know that that's the city of Minot's business. Making sure somebody has a roof over their head at night, yeah, I think that is our business. Others may disagree with me, but I think that is something we should be doing for the least of us. So thank you for your very informative presentation.
Any other questions? Scott?
Mr. Plank, quick comments here. I think that one of the conversations that we have had quite a bit since the public survey is the importance of public safety. And I wonder how much in talking about it, oftentimes some of the root causes of the work that our police department and fire department do are issues around homelessness, addiction, and mental health. How much did that come up during your conversations with the public, that kind of intersection? And during this process, did you have any conversations with those entities, with either the PD or the fire, and what their needs are?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Burlingame, I did not have any conversations with the police department, but the stakeholder organizations or stakeholders that did attend did express the need and those various situations where we do have individuals who are unable to find a place to go, so they may cause a problem in one area or a different area. The transportation issue in the wintertime can be an obstacle for an individual to get from maybe point A to a shelter or point A to somewhere where they can be safe. So those were areas that were identified with the stakeholders.
Sure. And if I can continue, I think too that adding on to, you know, last time at this body, we added some hotels on the north side of town to the Renaissance Zone. And that's wonderful, and that's great. And I talked to many people out there that would love to see us do something different, or perhaps rather us, but rather something else done differently with that. But the reminder is that there are actually people living there, and they are living there because of the reasons that you stated, which is rental difficulties, past histories, addiction, mental health issues. And if we just take those buildings and add them into the Renaissance Zone and they're redeveloped, it doesn't actually solve the problem. And so we have to continue to act on both fronts. Now, what is the role of the city in that? It is, of course, limited. That being said, this is an opportunity to use $331,580 a year towards some of those important issues that do make our community a better place to live and a safer place to live.
I agree.
Thank you. Anything further for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Now's the opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the entitlement process and the 5-year consolidated plan. Final call. Step forward.
Dick, I would definitely be in favor of something like that myself. It sounds like a good idea. For sure. Can I ask a question to the gentleman? Are we allowed to ask him, or is this just a call forward?
This is just your opportunity to either speak in favor of or against.
For sure, speak in favor of that, because I'll get some information for him later, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Jill McDonald. I'm the Executive Director of the Domestic Violence Crisis Center, and we are very much in favor of this CDBG opportunity for our community. In 2023, we served over 3,148 nights of safety for people that qualified, as Alderman Evans said earlier, with domestic or sexual violence or human trafficking. There's still many nights that folks aren't sheltered due to the limited resources that are in the community. So this is a huge opportunity for those that don't necessarily meet other criteria to be able to move forward. And the need is definitely here. So thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Mayor Ross, members of the council, my name is Lisa Hermosillo, and I'd like to speak in favor of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against. Final call. Seeing no further comments, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mark.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the authorized staff to continue to the completion of the 5-year consolidated plan for the CDBG.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item 7.2 on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is a hearing before the City Council in regard to the suspension of revocation of city liquor license number BL24-0322 issued to Duck Pond Ventures LLC. It's my understanding, and I did see that we have John Lakaduck is present here today. And did you sign in, John? Okay. John, have you received the copies of the amended complaint and the specifications of the hearing notice that were attached to the council agenda? Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Section 5-32 affords you at least 5 days' notice before the hearing is held. The amended complaint was served on you in less time than that. Do you wish to waive the 5-day notice requirement in Section 532 and have this hearing before the council held today, or would you like us to continue this matter to the next council agenda?
Mr. Mayor, we'll go ahead with today.
Okay. Mr. Lakaduck, please have a seat in the front row to the left of the podium. I also understand that we have Lieutenant Chapman and Chief Klug are here on behalf of the Minot Police Department. They are. And you guys will also, you'll have to sign in as well. The overview of how this hearing will proceed, Mr. Lakaduck, the way this hearing will proceed is I will read to you the allegations in the amended complaint and stipulation and ask if they are true. If you agree that these events occurred, we will offer you the opportunity to explain what occurred and what action you think the City Council should take, if any. We will then offer the Police Department the opportunity to respond, and Chief Klug will make a recommendation on what the action the City Council should take, if any. You will then have an opportunity to present any rebuttal information to the council. The council will then have an opportunity to ask questions before entertaining a motion on what action should be taken against your city license, if any. If you disagree that these events occurred, we will proceed in the similar fashion, except the police department will proceed first. We would give them the opportunity, we would give you the opportunity to respond, and the police department an opportunity for rebuttal. Both parties will have the opportunity to give a closing statement to the council. Closing statements are limited to 5 minutes to each party, and the party that proceeds with their case first will also proceed with their closing statement first and have an opportunity to reserve all or some of their 5 minutes for a rebuttal statement. Section 5-32 of our ordinance gives the council the power and the authority to suspend or revoke any license issued under Chapter 5 of our ordinances. Section 5.32 also provides that the city shall have the burden of proof. What that means is the police department must establish to the city council by preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that violations of our ordinances have occurred. Does anyone have any questions before we proceed to the hearing? Seeing none, for the record, the city council only has copies of the items attached to the city council agenda, which includes the amended complaint and specifications, hearing notice, and affidavit of service. Are there any other documents either party would like to disperse to the city council at this time? Both sides, okay. You can go ahead, John. Mr. Lackaduck, if you could just step to the dais, sir, or podium. Mr. Lackaduck, the amended complaint and specifications allege that Duck Pond Ventures LLC operated their premise at a location other than the licensed premise to which its license relates without obtaining a special event permit pursuant to Minot City Ordinance Section 5-40 on 6 separate occasions. The dates of those alleged violations are October 19th, 2023, November 2nd, 2023, November 30th, 2023, December 14th, 2023, February 22nd, 2024, and March 9th of 2024. Do you agree with the allegations in the complaint?
Yes.
At this time, Mr. Lackaduck, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hello, Mayor and council members and city staff. I am John Lackaduck of Duck Pond Ventures. So to talk about what happened here on those 6 dates in question, this all came to a head based on a previous conversation with the police department several years ago about how we handle events that are off-site that have the single payer of alcohol or the delivery of alcohol. And the position at the time was that single payer events or an event of this manner, which alcohol was not being sold on premise as a cash bar, would be akin to delivering alcohol under Code of Ordinances 5-10. So at that point, we're just going to discuss about the inequity concerns between me serving alcohol in such a manner or in a business or elsewhere. Was informed by the police department. It's because I have a license, and the example that we discussed was if they're getting a drink in a salon, it's part of the expectation that they're paying for a service, not the alcohol. So what that boils down to, what I'm getting is that it's because I got a license that we're going to go on a hunt for violations without any prior written warning, which is, I believe, in 532. I don't have that in my notes. So we don't get an official warning on it, and we get drug in on a straight into basically a hearing. This is where we are. So I filed plenty of special events before, and I made an open records request late last week to kind of see what was going on here. And it's 14 months and 14 days since the last time I saw you folks over my license, so here we are again. It takes 10 minutes, $25 to file a special event permit. It's not that I don't want to do it. It's that I believed I didn't based on the previous conversation I've had with the police department in the past. Now, that's not a willful disregard for the permit system. I was operating on the knowledge that I had at the time. Obviously, something changed at that point. And we could have had a simple written warning in my file with a phone call that said, hey, John, why aren't you square with us? You need to be having special event permits for this. So, and I would have told them at the same time, you know, this is the conversation we had years ago. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cause any problems, just trying to add to the vibrancy of our community. I will take the 10 minutes, pay the $25, no big deal. So it really feels like at this point that now we have this magical number of 5 or 6 violations, and we're finding license holders that have 5 or 6 violations when we go on a investigation to potentially have a suspension, a longer suspension or revocation inside 6 months. We have 2 people that have appeared in front of this council to defend their business. So, especially businesses that are trying to change the status quo and innovate for Minot. So, I do want to point out that in my open records request string of emails, Chief Klug points out that several of the alleged violations took place in 2023. I also appreciate you, Chief. Thank you for wanting to get ahead of this and prevent additional violations by reaching out to me. That email was sent on March 20th of 2024 at, I'm going to go with 10:33 a.m., where he asks Lieutenant Chapman to give me a warning that I must pull a permit. Failure to do so will result in a warning issued, which I've never received a formal warning from the police department. In that same string of emails between the city clerk, a captain at the police department, the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney asked if a warning was being issued, to which no one ever responded. So I really appreciate, Chief, your desire to give me a warning and get me up to speed with your new requests, that I get these permitted, which, like I said, is not a big deal. We can definitely do that. But it's one of the things that we're in this, and we're not opening a cash bar, and I don't know what your context is for this, so let me back up a little bit. I've handed you a packet of information. This is what the students at the class receive. They were teaching a 3-hour-long cocktail making class, where I'm not serving the alcohol. Of course, the alcohol is coming with me, and it's incidental to the education that they're receiving. So if anybody's ever here taught anybody how to do any cooking or cocktail mixing, it can be an exercise in frustration sometimes. So we developed a cocktail packet. And you've got the cocktail class and you've got the whiskey class packet, which now I'll have to rewrite since they're public record. So I'm giving those away, I guess, now. And some recipes for cocktails. That's provided all to the students. So they're there to learn, they're there to educate themselves, to have some culture, some vibrancy, not only just to further them, but also for people that they may entertain in their homes. So the alcohol is incidental to that. So anyway, we have to ask ourselves, if that education is a true threat to public safety, it needs to be permitted. But if that is what the city and the police want, I'm more than happy to do that. So now I relied on an outdated directive, and I'll tell you that. The police, I complied with Lieutenant Chapman's request for a list of the alleged violations as soon as he called. I mean, I might have forgot to email it to him for a couple days, but you know, I'll tell you, I held class. I educated people that were interested in making cocktails, both classic and contemporary, and they heard about cocktail history, cocktail tools, how to make syrups, and methods for mixing drinks. In one of the emails, it was especially highlighted that the event description was, oh, there will be drinking. They didn't pay that amount for drinks. They paid that amount for 3 hours of content, take-home recipes, and cocktail instructions. They paid for my time, a service, and they paid for the use of the space. I'm not giving alcohol away, but trust me when I say this. The amount they paid for the drinks that they made was not even close to the market price that they would pay for them in a bar. I was merely the catalyst of helping them find their inner bartender and guide them along on their journey. The drinks were created by the student were the drinks that they consumed, and I demonstrated how and what we were doing as part of a pleasant discussion, or after a pleasant discussion, for 30 minutes about responsibility, culture, history, terms, and the like in bartending. There was no bar in the essence that you could come up and ask for a drink that was hands off, made by me, or their hands off and made by me. And also so many drinks were thrown out that they were not what the student enjoyed. This was a learning environment, and I can't stress that enough. The alcohol was merely incidental to the learning objective. So we go back to the police department's comments about expectations of receiving a service, and I'm not trying to be difficult here. This is just operating on the information they had that became outdated at some point. And these students came with the expectation of sampling drinks that they learned how to make, much in the way that a lot of the ladies in our community would maybe expect a glass of wine or champagne with a pedicure, the service that they purchased. So, but I was told, John, it's because you have a license and you're dispensing alcohol, even on private property, was the message I heard. And by that logic, since I have a license, and like I said, I'm not trying to be difficult, but by that logic, and this is where it gets slippery and dangerous, that since I have a license, I have to pull a permit for my Thanksgiving to have a beer out of my fridge, or if I'm working on cocktails up at Regency outside of a permitted event as part of a menu. So the city attorney offered me 45 days suspended for the 6 alleged allegations, 4 of which took place in 2023. None were issued a formal written warning. Several of these events were canceled due to weather or lack of interest, but 6 took place. And while I don't agree with it, I could think that we can all come to some sort of compromise and offer to take 14 to 21 days for the alleged violations, since I haven't been given a copy of the first written notice of violation to become compliant, which I did immediately upon receiving a phone call. Now, city ordinance says that second violation is 3 days suspended and it continues to accrue from there. And that could stem from some sort of administrative permitting problem, such as this, or an issue all the way to serving a minor for the second time to get a 3-day suspension. And I can tell you that latter most certainly did not happen in my case. So, and I'm not here to make enemies, but the 45 days suspension that was offered feels a little mean. When this honorable council handed down a 30-day suspension in the last 6 months in the past, and if we use the words of the council, quote, knowingly putting customers and citizens in Minot in potentially life-threatening situations, end quote. So, I'm just going to ask for you to consider all of this as we go through this next part. The case that I just mentioned was in which the mayor and other city council members were witness to. In my case, I don't believe there's any evidence that that anybody attended the cocktail class in question and are relying primarily on my full disclosure to the police department of a list of number of attendees and dates and times, as well as social media. So I have at most instructed 116 of our fine citizens in cocktail making. Many of them were returning students to additional classes since they found it educational enough to come back and learn more and not just hear me talk about myself. In fact, I had a lady this past Thursday class, which, by the way, was fully permitted, that was visiting from Seattle, surprised to find Minot offered such an educational experience. She did not have that option back home. She came in a group of nurses to learn about daiquiris. We talked about Hemingway, we talked about cocktails, we discussed frozen daiquiris not being the real thing, and we progressed through the class. We changed the recipe little by little until it was something completely different from where we started, an educational journey. They understood the path to get there, the ratios to make the drinks, and took home a great packet of information on an intro to being a home bartender and the recipes to do it. Did they have drinks? Of course they did. Did they experience 3 hours of educational content? Yes. And was the dump bucket full of drinks they didn't like? Also yes. So in closing, I'm going to say that I was there. There was alcohol to add culture and vibrancy to our community from an educational activity that is obviously lacking, also in bigger cities according to that student. Hired to instruct educational classes and ask you to consider the intent of the laws in our books as you decide for yourself and the citizens of the community you've been entrusted to represent. What is the harm? And is this hearing for this punishment within the letter or spirit of law, and what message is the city sending to those that want to do business here?
Do you have anybody else, John?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
This time, Police Department, who will be presenting the evidence and testimony to the council on your behalf?
Mr. Mayor and council members, good evening. I'm not sure if you have questions about the investigation. I plan on outlining how everything took place, and then if there's questions about the actual investigation or the steps taken, I'll have Lieutenant Chapman come up and explain the steps that he took. First off, there was, just to address the issue with the second complaint and that happening within the 5 days of this hearing. There was a typo in the first one that we drew up. The February 22nd date was listed as February 2nd. So we redid the complaint and made sure he had all the correct information. Once that was served and we outlined the 45-day recommendation, and that was based off of, there's 6 violations. It doesn't, the city ordinance doesn't say certain violations have more weight than other violations. So there's 6 violations. It can be a revocation recommendation. I thought in this case it was a little heavy, so that's why the recommendation for 45 days. That's the 30 days for the 4th violation and an additional 15 for the other 2 that took place. Mr. Lakota commented on my email to Lieutenant Chapman on March 20th. I was actually, when this information came forward, I was actually in training in Arizona, so I didn't have a lot of time, but when I read it, I responded. My key, seeing that there was another event coming up, was making sure that nothing else happened. Like, I didn't want any more violations to come up. So I sent the email. I said, give him a warning, tell him he needs to get a license, make sure he transfers, and he did so. So I agree. He followed the recommendation we made at the time we made it. When violations happen, it's much like anybody that commits a violation. And these, technically, they're violation of city ordinance. They're all criminal violations, as well as the administrative violations. We choose the administrative option, and much like the cases we brought forth in the past, we did the same thing in this case. I think this is the right area to have this discussion and leave it to the council to decide any kind of license action. So in this case, I wanted to stop what was happening, make sure he understood, get a permit if he was going to continue with that event. And then there was discussion after that. I also rely on the city attorney's office. We have to have discussions to figure out what is the best course of action. In my email, yes, I did say, hey, some of these took place in 2023. That's also part of my reason for a lighter recommendation, but I also, at the time, I wasn't sure, and I forgot that there's a 2-year time frame that we can consider. And it's much like any violation that comes forward. If there's a violation of ordinance, we don't just start at the time we find out about the ordinance. If we find out there were 6 violations, we start when we can prove there were 6 violations. So once we had that information, it wasn't about the fact we didn't want to give them a warning. It wasn't that we waited until there were 6 violations. We just didn't know it was happening until there were 6 there. So at that point, that's when we start our process. And the investigation shows what it shows. He cooperated with that, which I can appreciate. Just being upfront, giving us the information on, hey, I held these 6 events, this is what we did. As far as this being educational and a conversation with the police department, I don't know who that was with. I've used the same criteria since this has been my process to approve in 2020, and that is, first question I ask is, will alcohol be sold? or will alcohol be dispensed? Sorry. That's my first question. The second question I ask is there a fee involved? And that means any fee. Is there a fee to get in the door? Do you have to buy baby clothes, get your nails done, haircut, whatever it is? If you have to pay for that service, you're paying to get the drink that comes with it. So that's not my rule, that's the state rule. So we follow that. Those are the criteria I use to make sure if Lieutenant Chapman brings one to me, he knows the questions I'm going to ask. Is it being dispensed? And is there money for it? In this case, since he does own a license, that would mean to do that in a different location other than his licensed premises, he would have to transfer a license to that location. So if there was confusion there, I can say I don't know where that conversation came from because I use the same criteria since I took over in 2020. But that's the bulk of the information. That's the reason for my request for the 45-day suspension of the license, and that's where I would leave my recommendation.
Chief Klug, do you have anybody else who wishes to offer testimony?
At this point, I don't have anything else to present unless somebody has a question about something that took place in the investigation. I would have Lieutenant Chapman come up.
Do we just do that?
But in this case, he did admit to the violations. So.
Steve.
I had two questions. First of all, I guess I might have more than that. So if this were a free will offering in return for getting your nails done or a haircut, and a free will offering was asked for, and for the glass of champagne you got, that would be okay or not okay?
If Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, if I can't walk off the street and ask for that same drink for free, then it's not allowed.
So if there's any exchange of money for anything associated with it, that would fall under your definition of something that has to be licensed. Okay, the two more substantive questions are, first of all, what's this fellow entitled to? What kind of license does he have, and does he sell beer? Is it a bar? Is it a supper club? What is he given permission to do?
Mr. Lackaduk has a retail liquor and beer license, so he has one of the licenses that hold a value with the city.
So
he has a full license.
Is it on sale or off sale, or
it can
both?
be either one.
Then
he actually operates an off sale and gets at the Regency on the main floor of the Regency.
I'm not sure what the Regency is.
The event center.
Okay.
Downtown. Okay. And get special event permits as he is the establishment that provides that service for the Regency events.
So it's basically a bar. You can walk in and buy alcohol, and he provides further specialized services. Or is it?
Alderman Pajagula, his operation is a liquor store, which he has set hours for, and then he transfers that to actually serve alcohol for the events. When he does a permit transfer to premise the event space, and at that time, then he can serve drinks.
Okay. So his business primarily operates at this event space.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the second question is, substantive question is, is where were these alleged offenses took place? Were they in a different building? Were they in?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, these happened at the Foundry, which is on East Central Avenue. I think it's a 400 block of East Central.
When I Googled that address, it was the old IH.
Right across by Ebenezer's, they share that parking lot.
Okay. And so he presumably rented a room or something and offered these classes and whatever?
Correct.
Okay. And then, are we aware of any other violations, for example, were the spaces unsafe in any fashion, or were minors permitted, or anything that would affect public health and welfare and safety? Because I know we previously had a situation where there weren't adequate means of egress from an establishment that was, purveying liquor, and I think that was a very significant concern, that people could have been hurt if something had happened. Was there anything like that going on here that we're aware of, or you're aware of?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, to my knowledge, no, but our concern, as far as the police department goes, our case is built on just the violations of Chapter 5, which pertains to alcohol. It doesn't deal with the other issue.
So the basis of the violation is that he was serving it, operating in a place that wasn't licensed, wasn't specified.
That's correct. He did not have a special event permit.
Okay. And if he had gotten a special event permit, what, $25?
It would have been $25 6 times, so
Okay.
$150.
If he had filled out the form and it had been approved, he would have been fine?
Correct.
Okay, so the issue, as I see it, is basically the failure to obtain a special events permit, which is required to do because he has a license. Now, he said something too, if he hadn't been licensed, or implied something, that if he hadn't been licensed, he wouldn't have been subject to this, or?
If, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, if somebody doesn't have a license, then we refer them to find somebody that has a license to transfer to the location they want to hold their event.
Just to make sure, for example, that liquor isn't distributed to minors and things like that?
Correct.
Okay, okay. So the safeguards that go with licensing were there because he's still licensed. He just didn't get the permit to have it, to operate his business at another location.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, one of the primary reasons that we want to know is a portion of that ordinance gives me the authority to ensure that it's a safe event, which means I can, if somebody comes and said, I want to have 600 people for this concert, I can say, well, you have to have 3 police officers there to cover that. When they don't get a permit, I don't have the opportunity, and I don't know, we don't know where alcohol is being distributed in our city unless they get a permit. We assume his operation is in the Regency, in his premise space, and when they take it on the road, so to speak, we don't know where that goes unless they tell us. So it's important that the permitting process is followed so we know where people are being served, because we also have the authority to do compliance checks, and that can be at their premise, and it can be at the premise that they establish through this process. And if neither of those are done, we have no way of knowing. We don't know if anybody was being served because we don't have the opportunity to even try to do a compliance check and ensure that a minor wasn't being served. So I'm not questioning that he would do that, but that's the overarching reason that we want to know where this takes place.
So it isn't just a matter of not filling out the paperwork, there's a purpose for the paperwork.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. You've been very helpful.
Anything else?
Sorry, Chief Klug, I just want to publicly clarify so that it's part of a meeting. Can you answer the question, just because I feel like Alderman Pajagula was kind of leaning towards that question. If a non-licensed holder was to sell tickets for an event and alcohol be served at it, we could not do an administrative hearing, but it would be a violation of law because you cannot sell alcohol. So that would be a criminal hearing, correct?
Correct. We could still pursue that criminally, but they are not, there's not a sanction to hold against them because they don't have a license that we can't bring them before this body, but we can charge them in a municipal court, and Judge Beal can make that determination at that time.
Do you have anybody else testifying today, John? Okay.
Not at this time.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Lackaduk, do you wish to provide any rebuttal testimony?
I don't necessarily, Mr. Mayor and council members, city staff, I don't necessarily know that I have a rebuttal, but maybe just a clarification on here. Once again, educational class. Like I said, it was based on an old conversation. I don't remember exactly where it came from the police department. It was definitely in command staff. We had a discussion about this and events like this because we had a situation pop up on, I don't remember, an open bar. And basically, get down to the brass tacks, the kind of the straw there that was the test was, are people paying cash across the bar for drinks that you're making at the time? And the answer for this was no. And I can tell you, Councilman Pottergill, sorry, I've had more people at my house for Thanksgiving than I had at most of these classes. We're talking like a group full of 6 people around a small table learning how to taste whiskey. So, like I said earlier, we're getting to a slippery slope situation where do we define how we do this? So if I have some friends over and teach them how to taste whiskey, because I'm licensed now, I have to have a special event permit for my residents. I think the answer is no, but you can see how it quickly becomes confusing, and I don't need to necessarily file a permit for that. So I know that the packet that Chief Klug provided to you has the list of event dates and times and the number of attendees. So I will tell you that 1 or 2 of them were bigger than others. Some of them have been 4 or 5 people. So if that is a serious concern to the city of Minot for public safety, so be it. However, there are house parties that are quite a bit larger, probably a little bit more detrimental to public safety. Also, some bars in this town that can hold 400 people. And I'll agree that, you know, the cops already know where they're at. But I guess down to the brass tacks on it, I don't feel 45 days is appropriate. I told you I will take a suspension of a shorter term. I think that's fair, and willing to compromise on that, especially given the circumstances that I immediately complied with Lieutenant Chapman's request for information on these events. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, I just want to make sure I'm following the right path here. Okay. Seeing none. Thank you, John. Thank you. This time, we'll offer Chief Klug, if you have any closing statement.
Mr. Lackaduk will go first.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Is that your closing?
Was that your closing statement?
Well, hello again. I guess this is now my closing statement. I guess, you know, we alluded to before that I guess it can't be incidental to the education provided, even though there's quite a bit of information that you hold in your hands, which now is public record. So I guess anybody, feel free to have my bartending class for free. If you're listening out there to this meeting, you can go ahead and grab that. It's worth a lot, and it's really fun. I spent a lot of time on it, so super happy to provide that to our fine citizens. Additionally, you know, we do have some salons in this town that do provide the wine with a haircut, so I guess we need to decide as a city what's the spirit of the law and what's really the letter of the law. And it really sounds like this gets down to not dotting T's and crossing I's, because we all know I'm more than capable of it. Pointed out in an email from the city clerk 24 minutes into the March 6th meeting of 2023 discussing special event permits. Like I said, I was operating under a different set of guidelines from the police department, and so be it. So I will henceforth go forward and permit everything that I do as far as the operation of alcohol. So in that, I just ask you that you consider my suggestion, offer of compromise for a shorter suspension, and take my slap on the back of my hand, and we all move forward as a community together to work forward, to work towards making Minot a great place to live and work.
Steve.
Just a very blunt question. What kind of a compromise penalty would you be suggesting? Because we all seem to agree, I think, that, or at least you can see that there is a violation. What do you think would be a fair punishment?
Gosh, I think a warning letter would be great, but I think 14 to 21 days, somewhere in there would be okay. Like I said earlier, I don't think 30 days or 45 days is appropriate, considering the action this council took less than 6 months ago on a different license holder for, and gave them 30 days. So at least at the very most, a 30-day suspension would fall in line with the action that the council's already taken. So,
thank you.
Given the nature of my violations.
Anything else for Mr. Lackaduk? Okay, thanks, John. And now is an opportunity, Chief, for you to provide your closing comments. Closing statement.
Mr. Mayor and council members, it is correct. You a couple months ago, you made the decision to go 30 days for 4 violations for a person not transferring their premises to a location that they weren't licensed. That's the violation. All the other things, the unsafe property, that even though you might consider it, it's not part of the violation that was before you. The violation that was before you was an alcohol violation. That is what is outlined in Section 5 of the ordinance. So that's what you made a decision on. You just had other factors to consider that the city was presenting because they were being brought up as far as how we were warning that person about not doing what they were doing. So this is 6 violations, exact same thing, transfer, held to an event without a license. So there's 2 more violations than the last person. This holds a penalty up to revocation, and I'm merely making a recommendation of 45 days. The other thing I would point out, the other business lost every day that they could not be open. They're a full-time establishment, open, and that's their business, their bar. This is a liquor store, has limited hours, does special event permits as their business model. So the impact to the business overall is not apples to apples. These are 2 separate business models. The penalty, the 45 days probably isn't going to even touch what the other business owner suffered for their violations. So I would just point out, I think the 45 days is reasonable, given the facts. I appreciate that Mr. Lackaduk was cooperative with our investigation. I think our recommendation is reasonable. I just want to make sure that the information's out there. As far as, clouding this whole issue with serving people that come over for Thanksgiving, I guess that depends on, is he charging people to come over and drink his alcohol at his house? And if the answer is yes, then yes, you should have a permit. So the law doesn't say where or how you collect money. It's simple. If you're going to collect money and you're going to sell alcohol, you need a license or you need to have a permit. That's what it states. I think we can all be reasonable as we work through that. So I'm not going to address that issue anymore, but a sale is a sale. That would be my closing argument to this issue.
Gary?
Well, I guess I'm still unclear. Was provision 532 followed with the first violation? Did Mr. Lackaduk ever receive a letter of warning?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, no, because we learned of all 6 at the same time, all 6 violations.
Thank you.
Yes, and when was Mr. Lackaduk informed that there was a problem here in that sequence of the 6 events? What was the date of that? I didn't catch.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, that would have been on the 20th of March of 2024.
So all these had already happened, and there were no subsequent violations, and he applied for and received a special events permit for some business after the date of notice?
That's correct, and he also applied for, he actually served at another event at the Foundry in between this time. It wasn't the same type of event, and he got a special event for that event. So he knew there was a need to get a permit to move his premises to that location. So it wasn't about the location, it was just about, whatever his belief was, which may give credit to, he was confused about that. But I answer all the questions about the liquor licenses, since my name goes on the approvals. Not saying he didn't talk to anybody, I'm not gonna second guess him on that, but
So just to be clear, the last offense was March 9th, and he received notice on March 20th.
correct.
And at what point did he apply for the 7th, what could have been the 7th infraction, but turned out not because he applied for the permit? When was that?
I don't have that might be on this list.
I believe that was a rescheduled event, correct, John?
It looks
You
like-
applied for it, but, yeah.
Yep,
28th of,
March, correct.
so after he was notified on the 20th, he applied for a permit on the 28th. So there wasn't a 7th violation.
Correct.
So he learned his lesson after he was warned.
He complied with our request, yes.
He learned his lesson, he should obey the law. Okay, thank you.
I have another clarifying question. So I'm looking at all the Facebook posts, and it's an event sponsored by the Foundry. So I'm assuming that they were the recipients of the fee that people paid, not Mr. Lakadak. Like whatever arrangement the Foundry had with him, I don't know, and I think is, moot to this. But like all of these events are being sponsored by the Foundry. And so like I'm assuming if I went, I would have paid the Foundry $65.
I don't know where the money was exchanged.
But the event is clearly the Foundry's event. It's not
They
John
could have
Lakadak's
sponsored the
event.
space.
Well, no, they're saying it's their event. Come join us while we host.
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, Mr. Lakadak did testify earlier that he didn't make enough money to cover the alcohol. It was for the education.
But that could be because the Foundry wasn't paying him the full $65 that they were getting. We don't know that, right?
No.
Because it wasn't a contract between the people and John Lakadak. It was, a contract between the people and the Foundry. Right,
Maybe.
you paid the Foundry to get in, not John.
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, I haven't seen a contract.
I'm just saying that is a contract. When there's an exchange of money for a service, that's a contract.
Steve?
So are we going after the Foundry too then? Or shouldn't we be?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, they're not a license holder.
So I can
You-
sell
you-
liquor
you
without a
have a
license, and that's not a
licensed-
problem?
You have a person with a license who is supposed to know the rules to serve alcohol in our community, and we trust that they're following that. If they're not going to follow that, that's where we may as well not license them. We may as well just
No,
let
I
people
agree with
serve
you, he's on the
alcohol.
hook as far as I'm concerned, but
So it's not on the Foundry. It's much like the business he runs. Even though that space isn't his and there's a contract for somebody to rent that for a wedding, he's still responsible for the alcohol. It doesn't go to anybody involved in that. If I deliver food for that wedding, I'm not also connected because there's a contract for food and a space and alcohol. It's on the license holder and license owner to transfer and be responsible for any alcohol delivered.
But they're the ones sponsoring the event. It's their event. They're causing someone to furnish alcohol for payment. I mean, it seems like they're on the hook too. What am I missing here, Madam Attorney?
So, Chief Klug, can you just explain why you're citing Mr. Lakadak with this violation?
Yes. So, Mr. Mayor and council members, John Lakadak is being held accountable and cited for this under city ordinance because he is a license holder and he failed to transfer that license when he distributed and sold alcohol at the location of the foundry. So because he's a license holder, the ordinance states if he's going to move that operation from his premises, he has to establish another premises in order to deliver or distribute or sell alcohol at that other location.
I understand that, that's clear. My intent isn't to let him off the hook. I think he should suffer a consequence, but why aren't we going after the person who sponsored the event, for whom Mr. Lackadack arguably was an agent, or at least a co-conspirator or co-planner?
So the license holder, if I may, Mayor and
Yes.
Alderman Padregula, they're the ones who is responsible under 5-40, a permit issued pursuant to 5202001 to allow a licensee to operate at a premises other than the licensed premises to which the license relates. That's what Chief Klug has cited him for. So that's a violation that's brought forth against the licensee. So he didn't file a special event permit, is what the evidence and what the admission was by Mr. Lackadack on 6 different occasions. And so that's why Chief Klug is bringing this before the council for its consideration. The council's the finder of fact on whether or not these violations of section 5-40 actually occurred or if they didn't occur. So the reason why, and Chief Klug, correct me if I'm wrong, that you did not bring charges against the foundry is because they are not a license holder. And so the charge that you bring against them would be a criminal violation. Is that correct?
That's correct. If there was some proof that they were responsible for some part of delivering that alcohol, they could be held responsible. It wouldn't be under this section. This one applies to failing to transfer a license.
Yes, and so, Mayor, may I continue?
Sure.
So just drawing your attention, Council, to section 5-32, that's regarding suspension or revocation of a license. Subsection F, which Chief Klug has mentioned a few times here, as has Mr. Lackadack, references the penalties that you can impose. And I'll note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, it says those penalties are in addition to any other civil or criminal penalties that a licensee may be subject to. So this is a hearing that's based only on the special event permit, if he got one or if he didn't. And if that happened 6 different times, and what penalty the council believes that it should impose in this case. On the criminal violations, and the chair will get to this in a second, but the burden of proof in this particular matter is by a preponderance of the evidence. So 51% more likely than not that he did not obtain a special event permit on 5 separate occasions. And that's the burden by which chief and
I understand that.
has to prove it. In a criminal case, that has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which is also a higher burden of proof. So those are things that the police department has to take into consideration when they're deciding, are we going to bring forth an administrative hearing matter before the council, or are we going to bring formal charges forward through the criminal route?
Just wait, Steve, are you finished, Dave?
Yeah, Carrie was going to follow up on something I said.
So I am not under the belief that Mr. Lackadack was actually operating. I don't believe the definition of operation is met. He was not operating as a license holder. He was teaching a class. I think unless somebody can show otherwise that there is a different definition than operate, I don't think there was a violation.
Okay, so we'll kind of hold off on some of these comments until we get to our deliberation.
I was asking the city attorney, is there a different definition of operation I'm missing?
I'm sorry, what definition of operation are you?
The one you read from, like, just a few minutes ago, about operating at a different location.
So what I read a few minutes ago, section 5-40 special permits, a permit issued pursuant to section 5-02-01.1 North Dakota Century Code to allow a licensee to operate at a premises other than the licensed premises to which the license relates, shall be issued administratively by the city clerk upon the following terms and conditions. I did not read a definition of operate.
Well, no, but is there a definition of operate? Like, are we going to use the common, shared sense of what operation means? Or is there a special legal definition we should be using?
Underneath our city ordinance, there is not a specific definition of operate.
Anything further for Chief? Thank you, Chief. John, since there was more information presented, we'll give you an opportunity to rebut, and if you just want to segue into your final closing statement.
Yes, well, I already have my closing statement, but I guess we're going to continue the conversation. I super appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, city staff, council members. I think what Councilperson Evans is getting after was, the question is, was this Duck Pond or was this John Lackaduk? Because as you recall, this is a limited liability company, and I am separate from that as a person and also as the sole member of it. So as you decide on your handing out the punishment on this, where the evidence is that it was Duck Pond and not me as a person. Any questions?
Any questions of John? So John, I do.
Okay.
So you brought the alcohol there.
Yes,
Did you pay the foundry for use of their facility?
I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I guess I do have one more question, Mr. Lackaduk. Was I correct in
Councilwoman.
assuming that if I was an attendee, the $65 was paid to the foundry, and then then there was whatever arrangement you had with the foundry?
Correct. All tickets were arranged for the foundry, which led to the comments when I opened that it was a single payer event and that it could reasonably been accomplished if this was operated under Duck Pond Ventures as a retail delivery under 5-10.
But you were not the one selling the tickets? And
I was not selling the
Okay,
tickets,
thank
no,
you.
and I was we had our contract off to the side like you had mentioned.
All right, seeing nothing further, thank you for your testimony and statements. We will consider all the information and exhibits offered to have been received by the city council and entered into the record on this matter. At this time, we'll turn the floor over to the council to make its findings of facts and conclusion. Each of the council members has been provided with paper copies of a few sections from Chapter 5 of the city's ordinances for your reference. I'd like to draw your attention specifically to Section 5-32, which specifically addresses suspension or revocation of a license. Subsection 5-32 lists the reasons for which the city council can suspend or revoke a license issued under Chapter 5, and subsection F of 5-32 lists the penalties of the licensee is subject to, depending on how many violations of the ordinance the council believes occurred. Council members may offer what they consider to be facts of the case and make a determination on the complaint at this time. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, couple things. First, just a point of clarification, I think Chief had stated in the last case that we went through, there was 4 violations. Looking back, it was 5. So it was at the level of per the ordinance for revocation, just for clarification. I know that was stated. And then a question for the attorney or whoever can answer this. So we have this scenario happen in other cases where someone transfers their license. One I can think of is like the auditorium, I believe, uses Sports on Top's license when they have an event. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
If someone were to be served underage at the auditorium during a rodeo event, who would be liable? Would it be the rodeo? Would it be the license holder?
I might defer to Chief Klug. I mean, he'd have to conduct an investigation on the specific facts and circumstances on what happened in that instance, but
Let's just say the license holder themselves is there and serves a minor.
it would be the license holder. I mean, the reason why Section 5-40 is there is so that Chief Klug, and he testified to this, knows that this event is happening at this certain place, The special event permit application will have the details of that in there, and they'll be able to make sure that it's a safe place in order for them to disperse alcohol.
Okay, and that answers my question, just where the liability therein lies when it's the license holder who's held to that standard. And I'm going to read something real quick if I can.
Go ahead.
Obviously, we have another agenda item after this pertaining to the alcohol ordinance rewrite committee. And one of the first items of business that we did was recommend to that committee to, within our city ordinances, adopt a preamble reflective of Grand Forks's. And I'll just read it for you real quick and how it will fit into Minot. It says, the city of Minot finds that the safety and welfare of its citizens and neighborhoods are of the highest priority, and the judicious dispensing of alcohol is in keeping with this premise. The possession of an alcoholic beverage license in the city is a privilege, not a right, a privilege that must not be taken for granted, but rather must be continually conditioned by the license holder's adherence to the applicable laws and regulations. And again, I bring that up because I do believe there is a responsibility of a license holder when they go into an establishment to make sure they understand the laws. However, we had this discussion today as well, is that we feel the city can also do a better job of educating license holders. We want to, throughout the year, during license renewal periods, hold an open house for license holders to come and ask these questions, to understand what events can I do? How do these laws apply to me? How does state law apply to me? What changes have there been made? Can I do this? Can I do that? So again, I think there's an underlying message here. We're here again, having a case that we as a city can also do a better job of educating license holders. So there isn't some level of confusion and some gray area where it says, well, I see it this way, or I see it that way, or someone has to have a law degree to understand our ordinances. So I guess I'll just offer up a motion, if I may, unless I'm out of line.
No.
Okay, I'll offer a motion of 30 days suspension of the license.
I'll second.
30 days commencing from when?
Tomorrow?
Is that okay to put that into the motion, Steve?
Sure.
Starting tomorrow?
Sure.
And if I may continue. And again, the reason I bring it up, because these are topics of discussion that we're having right now at that committee level of how to clarify these things. How do we get, Steph?
So one thing that the council needs to do at this hearing is offer up what you believe are the facts of the case and what the council's findings will be. After whatever decision is made here today, we'll reduce that down to writing an official order that'll be signed by the mayor. So alongside with this proposed motion, if the council could state what it believes occurred here, what are the facts of this specific case, and we'll reduce that down to writing for the order.
So as you address the motion for discussion, also offer up that information for staff.
I guess,
Go ahead,
again, why do I feel that that's a fair and equitable suspension? I believe there was a violation. Do I believe it was malicious in its intent? Do I believe that there was some bad advice or ill advice given to them 10 years ago? I don't know. That's hearsay. But I do believe there was a violation. I do believe that we can do better as a city and as license holders. And again, no one's trying to put anybody out of business. Nobody's trying to shut anybody down so they can't recover. But I do want to remain somewhat consistent with our actions of the past. And I do believe there was a level of compliance for Mr. Lackaduk with the investigation, which I think bodes well. And again, these are real-time discussions that we're having, even with the violations that were discussed today at our ordinance rewrite committee. So those are my reasonings.
And just to clarify, when you say you found there was a violation, do you find that there were 6 violations on the dates that were set forth in the complaint?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you finished, Paul?
Yes.
Carrie?
So I'm not going to support that motion. I don't agree with those facts. I think Section 532 was not violated. I do not think Mr. Lackaduk was acting as an operator or a license holder at that time. I believe he did not sell any alcohol. He was dispensing for a class, and he did not sponsor this event. I don't even know if he he said he made money, but potentially this was not his event. He was the teacher at that event. And looking at the suspension and revocation criteria, I don't think those were met.
Well, Steve, Lisa?
Yeah, I know that the police and I think the council can't be held to the idea of prosecuting and going after everybody who was involved. I mean, if there's a bar fight, you pursue people, and if they all run, you catch one and you charge them. Because you couldn't catch the others doesn't mean there's one person you could catch gets off scot-free. So I think Mr. Lacaduc does have some role in this. Whether he knew or should have known, he should have had a transfer. Certainly after the police notified him, he knew and he complied. I think, Paul's right, this is very murky. I'm having a hard time understanding this. And I question whether there was intent. Certainly when he was notified there was a problem, he complied. And he's told us he intends to comply in the future. So I think the major purpose here has been met. I do think he has some culpability in the sense that he probably should have known about this beforehand. I don't know if he's applied for transfers previously or not, but I think he probably should have said, hey guys, you really should get a permit for this, or somebody should get a permit. He's willing to take a punishment. To be honest with you, my original thought was to suspend him for 10 days. I'm not convinced yet whether he did violate it or not. I think he did. I think there should be some sanction. I guess probably more so as a message to other people that you need to comply by the rules. So I think he's publicly admitted his culpability here. He's willing to take his knocks. I probably would support 30 days. I think 10 would be more reasonable. But I am concerned about the fact that I think Carrie has a good point here. I don't think he's the primary culprit here. And I think the foundry also needs to be gone after. I know this isn't the purpose of this hearing, but it doesn't strike me as being fair that we go after somebody and not go after somebody else who I think is implicated. It sounds like selective prosecution, to be honest with you. When I read the ad here that we've been given, it says, contact the foundry to reserve seats for your group. If you need a refund, contact the foundry. It says, too, that you must be over 21, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, and it also says that light refreshments will be provided, supplies and snacks will be provided. Contact the foundry to reserve seats. If you need to cancel, you contact the foundry. This sure to me looks like the foundry's event. And I don't feel comfortable throwing the book at Mr. Lacaduc while somebody else is clearly, what I think, getting away with it. So I have mixed feelings about this. I think I probably will vote for some sort of sanction, but it just, the 45 strikes me as being excessive. And I think the big point, like Paul was saying, is that these rules are very ambiguous and very complicated and make life and business development and improving the quality of life so much more painful for people.
Lisa?
Oh, thank you. So just for clarification, do we have the authority to change the days per offense? Do we have that flexibility in not following the recommendation in the ordinance?
Yeah, that's
We
what we
could
did.
choose a number of days that we felt was appropriate.
That's what we did for the spot.
You do.
Okay. So I'm sharing the same amount of concern and heartburn that my fellow colleagues are speaking about. I think 30 days is too much, because I do believe that he was teaching a class. I do believe that it is on Mr. Lacaduc to know the ordinances and the laws. I can remember conversations years ago about, salons and spas and boutiques having the freedom to do this. I can understand where there would be some miscommunication or some confusion. So I am having a difficult time with 30 days. I would like to amend that to 10 days.
Let's, should we continue with the motion on the floor? Vote that, and if that fails, go back?
Mr. Mayor, I
Go
would,
ahead.
I would make a motion to amend my own motion to 10 days if that's,
Question, is the motion to amend to 10 days still based on there being a finding that there were 6 violations of the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. So just to point out, in section 7, you have the escalated penalties, the 5th violation. In this instance, you would be moving that the business be closed for 10 consecutive days. Is that accurate?
Yes.
10 consecutive days starting tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that Alderman Pittner that will, are you friendly amending, or do
I
you
can make
want
the-
to,
I can-
how do you want to do this?
I can make the friendly amendment.
Is that all right with Alderman Padrigula?
Yes, it is.
I have one more comment.
Go ahead.
Alderman Padrigula, I just want to publicly state after your comments, the Foundry would not have been able to apply for a special event permit. Special event permits are
sort of
only
permit.
able to be applied for by license holders. I get contacted probably on the weekly from places that want to have a special event where they have alcohol at. And if they don't have a license, I have to refer them
Someone who does.
to somebody who holds a license. I don't refer them to any specific person. I just say you have to get a license holder to take out the event permit. So, and I think that's where Chief Klug was coming from, that it is the licensee's responsibility to understand the ordinances, because the actual place of business, which is the Foundry, did not have the ability to even take out a special event permit.
They were the instigator.
Just to add some context to Michaela's comments, this is the alcohol ordinance for the city of Minot. And this is the rule book for those that own a license. This is the rules that they have to abide by. And the Foundry, I would imagine in good faith, reached out to a license holder and said, you are a licensed professional in this field. You are an expert in this field. Will you host an event there? And they put their faith in a licensed professional to adhere to the rules and the guidelines set forth by their commitment, by their investment, by being a license holder. So again, I don't hold the Foundry at fault. They were under the assumption they were playing by the rules. So again, I don't see that. I think it goes back to the license holder and their, like we stated in the preamble, that will be part of our ordinance recommendation. They're held to a higher standard if they hold a license within the city of Minot.
Carrie?
I just want to clarify, because you did misspeak for me. My position does not mean I think
I apologize.
the Foundry is culpable. They have done nothing that violates the city's municipal court or state or federal laws.
I take back what I said then.
And so,
I'm sorry, I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I
That's
just
wrong.
want to be very clear that.
Scott?
I'm, as I sit here, first off, finding a fact, I find that obviously Mr. Lacaduc admitted that there were these violations, so I don't see much gray there. I also see the fact that he agreed to or recommended 14 to 21 days of suspension. And the other thing that's kind of going through my head here, two other things. First off, appreciating what Alderman Pittner said about the role of the city. I hate these violations. I hate this idea. I hate the mass lack of communication or misunderstandings that exist, that anytime that we can do anything, and I know that there's desire, and now we just need to put the effort in to ensure that nothing like this happens anymore, because it's terrible for our businesses that are trying to survive in this community. I also want to say that, as we talked about, we did have another case, and one of the hardest votes I've had up here was for us, not 100% similar, but also a similar number of offenses that we did 30 days. So I'm going back and forth on this, recognizing the fact that Mr. Lacaduc has admitted and agreed to at least 21 days, and using as a precedent that we have set previously of 30 days, and trying to find what is the right answer for that. So I don't have a question right now. I'm just kind of stating where I'm sitting.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know the ordinances are being worked on, and we have another item that sort of goes to that. But I think there is, in my mind, the reason that I guess I'll support the amended motion that we're talking about is that I think in the section where there's presumed to be kind of a ladder of penalty, the very first thing is, first violation, a letter of warning. And to me, that makes it difficult when you in a case like this where you, all of a sudden we're at 6 violations and there has been no letter of warning. So I think that is a difficult thing to reconcile. So, you know, it would imply then that if there was a letter of warning and there was a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth violation, that's pretty blatant disregard for the law. I don't see that that's what we have here. I think it doesn't reach that level. So I guess I'm willing to support the motion that's on the floor.
Okay. You?
Me?
Go ahead.
For you?
Final.
But just as Chief Klug said, I mean, and this was the case with the previous revocation as well, or suspension, is all, I mean, this law contemplates the police are going to find out about the violations one at a time, and that rarely is the case. You know, in the previous one, it was discovered all at the same time. In this one, it was all 6 were discovered at the exact same time. So there wasn't like a first violation, no letter, second violation, no letter. Like it was like literally, it came to the attention of law enforcement, correct, Chief Klug, all at the same time. So, I mean, again, I think that's ripe for rewriting in the new ordinance, right? About whether or not, if the violations are all discovered at the real time, like it's, logistically, you can't then follow this ladder because you're on violation 6, you know, when it is your first sort of, you know, so it's messy.
Problematic.
Yeah.
So before we go to the roll call, just a few of my thoughts here. I still go back to the 30, you know, going back to what we did with the spot and what we're doing here. And I think it was Alderman Pittner or someone mentioned the business plans are different. 30 days to a bar that's open 7 days a week is a shot in the wallet. 30 days to a bar that's maybe on the weekends, you know? So if you do 10 days, that's effectively, I mean, if he only does weddings and special events, he's not open 7 days a week. So is it really a punishment? If it's not, in my eyes, it's not equal. We had the same amount of violations, yet a bar that is open 7 days a week, normal operating hours, that's going to hurt them more. So is that equal? So that part of me does not agree with moving it down to the 10 days. And I still fall back. I mean, the findings of fact, there were 6 violations. 6 times that a special event permit was not taken out. That's a fact, and he admitted to that. To us tonight, admitted to that. And that's where I go back on. So I can't support the 10 days. I actually put, you know, I actually felt the 45 days is probably more equal to a 30-day violation to a bar that's open 7 days a week. So that's where I stand, and I won't support the 10 days. So at this time, we will call the roll.
Just so the council knows, since it was a friendly amendment, the motion out there is to approve a 10-day suspension of a license commencing May 21st of 2024.
And that there were 6 violations of the ordinance. Mitigating factors, it sounds like the council is finding that there was no letter of warning issued in succession when the violations occurred. Does that sound accurate? Okay.
Do you want additional mitigating factors?
If you would like to list them for the record and the council.
Yes, I would.
agrees. Sure.
I guess one would be some ambiguity as to who the sponsor of this event was, and whether the advertised sponsor, being the founder, whether they have some responsibility in this. I think the other and third mitigating factor would be his admission of the violations. A fourth would be immediate cessation of the problematic behavior when he was warned and informed. A fifth would be his following the ordinance and asking for the special or the transfer permit as soon as he was informed of it. And sixth, his proclamation that he intends to be lawful and obey the ordinance into the future.
Party agree to the mitigating factors that were listed by Alderman Padragula?
Yes.
Second agree?
He was the second.
The second.
Okay. I think we can go to the roll.
Pittner,
No.
Ross,
No.
Evans,
No.
Janser,
No.
Burlingame,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the motion, please? I'm confused.
Motion was to approve the 10-day suspension of the license commencing May 21st through, or May 21st, 2024, and then the list of the mitigating factors.
Okay. No, with the expectation there'll be a substitute motion offered.
So that motion failed.
I would introduce a substitute motion then,
Go ahead, Steve.
and that would be to give a 30-day suspension.
We have a motion for a 30-day suspension. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Again, we're
Yes.
finding that the 6 violations occurred, and we would consider the same mitigating factors
Yes.
that were articulated in the
Yes.
previous motion.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Padragula,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Evans,
No.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
That motion passed.
Okay, thank you for your time this evening. The city attorney will reduce the council's decision and findings of fact to writing in council order, which I will sign. The city clerk will ensure a copy is provided to Mr. Lacaduck. Mr. Lacaduck, please contact the city clerk to confirm how you would like to receive your findings and provide her with the appropriate contact information. Moving on to item 7.3 on the agenda, contract council, alcohol ordinances. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move the recommendation.
I have a motion by Mark. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Steve. Discussion.
Can they start tomorrow?
I don't know, Paul, you're the chairman of the alcohol review.
Yeah, I'll give some background on this. Through our several meetings over the past handful of months, I feel like we've done a lot of good work as far as diving into the ordinance, trying to make it, provide clarity from definitions of premises to processes to renewals, to find efficiencies not only for users of the systems and obtaining the license, but also for staff. One of the sticking points on moving forward is the cap, is the capped form of licenses that the city of Minot participates in. We did have a motion today that was provided to the committee of do we want to work towards removing the cap within the city of Minot? And the vote passed 3-1 with one member not present. To give some context to that, one of the goals of this committee from the onset, and I think it's been the underlying theme, is to make this ordinance as pro-growth, pro-entrepreneurship, pro-investment with the city of Minot as we can. So that's the sticking point on wanting to move towards removing the cap. And not that the committee has any power to do that. That would still come to this council to vote on and have the final say in. But in order for us to get there, we need more horsepower within our legal staff. And I can let Steph speak to that, but right now, we're at a point in this process where a lot of our next decisions hinge on whether or not the cap is removed, whether or not we work towards that with some of those items. So that's kind of put us at this point of bringing that to the council and allowing resources to be expended to move that along. And I'll let Steph or anybody else, the mayor or Michaela, provide any more context to that.
Yeah, I just think, just to piggyback on that, like Paul said, we've come to a point to where we need that input, and to put it on the shoulders of staff is just, with their current workload, it's just not. It's the right thing to do at the right time, and that's where I stand on it, Steph. If you want to follow up.
And I'd just echo the comments of Alderman Pittner and Mayor Ross. the alcohol ordinance rewrite, it's a heavy lift without the cap being present, but we have this unique circumstance in our ordinance that's just going to take a considerable amount of time and research that frankly our office just doesn't have the time to do. And my larger concern is chasing down different options and then have that not be the appetite of the council. I would like some confirmation at the very least. Do you want us to walk down this route? But we would appreciate the opportunity to have contract counsel on the alcohol ordinance rewrite in general. I think it would allow the committee to move more at the pace that it would like to with this rewrite. So I think it would bring this back to you in a faster fashion, and it would perhaps hopefully allow some more options to be presented to you on the cap, if that's something that the council wants this committee to examine.
Steve?
Just a couple of comments, or I guess more than a couple. First, I sat in on several meetings of the Alcohol Committee, and I think Paul and the committee have done a very good job in bringing out the issues and giving a voice to people who are impacted by this as operators of these businesses. Second comment I'd make is I'm a little uncomfortable from a theoretical standpoint. I think the ordinance needs to be simplified and made easier to understand, but I'm particularly uncomfortable with the designation of so many different categories. There's Souris Valley Golf Course, there's the National Guard, there's an MSU permit, there's an airport permit. You name it, there's a separate kind of permit. It's very hard for me to justify that kind of specificity. It's like saying, well, it's a certain kind of misdemeanor if you slug somebody in the face on a Monday, but it's a different kind of misdemeanor if it's a Tuesday. I don't see any rationale for that kind of technical, complex nature of the licenses. It's very hard to understand. And, naming a specific organization in an ordinance really strikes me as being odd. Either the conduct is permissible or not, but why is Souris Valley Golf Course listed as an entity? Shouldn't it be all golf courses or any golf courses? That seems kind of strange. If the owner goes out of business, then this section is inapplicable or whatever. It's just kind of odd. The major concern I have, though, is to echo what Paul was saying, that I think the key issue is, does the city regulate the number of licenses? For me, from a libertarian conservative standpoint, I don't think it's the government's business to regulate that. We don't regulate the number of gas stations in town or the number of psychologists' offices or the number of hospitals. I don't think we should be in the business of regulating the number of establishments that sell a certain product. I think licensing, it makes sense given the public safety issues involved, but capping them doesn't make sense. The other side of it is that people have invested a lot of money in some of these licenses, and I don't think we can arbitrarily take away their property right. If they invested money thinking that this license would hold a certain value, or probably hold a certain value, now to come along and pull the rug out from under their feet just isn't fair. So I think we have to figure out some way of compensating them. That's just not right. We're talking about major sums of money that make the difference between a business being operable and not operable, and that's just not right. So I think some expertise or some knowledge of how other cities have managed this makes a lot of sense. So I would very strongly support this, and again, pass along those suggestions from my point of view in terms of redrafting the ordinance. It's a worthy purpose, and I think having a preamble there to make that clear is very important. And then I think we can simplify and straighten out and avoid some of the problems we've had, and also certainly encourage entrepreneurship and things like that. But to me, it's basically a rights issue. What businesses that our government have regulating sale of a product? I don't think it has hardly any. Making sure it's a safe product or sold in a safe manner. People aren't risking other people's welfare, but beyond that, it's not our business.
Carrie?
I guess it's for the city attorney. Why, and I'm completely agnostic on this. I don't have an answer. Why Onstead Twitchell? Like, is there no other law firms? This is the only one that came forward?
They're available, and there are conflict counsel on bankruptcy and other matters relating to HR. So I also reached out to Swanson and Workup. They were the attorneys that we had recommended when we brought this up initially, and the council declined to retain them. And as of the date of this memo, they were kind of continuing to consider the city's request. They've been in a position where they've done this before in Grand Forks. It's a more different ordinance, but they've been in the city attorney's shoes when this type of an ordinance has been examined
Onstead
in the
or
past.
Workup?
Workup.
Has Onstead ever been involved in alcohol rewriting?
I haven't specifically asked alcohol rewriting, but they are oftentimes counsel for a number of different municipalities, so they're familiar with this area of law. Finding somebody who's an expert in having done something like this before is going to be kind of a rare find, and that's an option the council could direct us to do, is to request qualifications, or we could contact other council for different quotes as well. That's an option we could definitely explore, but in the interest of moving this item along at the pace that the committee would like to see it move along, Onston and Twiddle indicated that they were available, and I'm confident with our past interactions with them that they would be able to provide competent counsel.
And well, so we have 50,000 unencumbered. What are they gonna want for this job?
It's gonna depend on the amount of work that's assigned for them for this particular lift. Now, our office wouldn't necessarily walk away from this ordinance rewrite. We would be present at all of the meetings as well, and we would continue to offer as much assistance as we can. It's just specifically this cap. That's the main issue we would want them to tackle while we're reviewing the rest of the ordinance. I can certainly go back and get them a quote for how much they think that would
No,
cost.
I mean their scope. I think the scope, if it's that narrow, right, and it's that, it's not gonna be a huge.
It's a heavy lift. There's going to be a lot of things to consider. Mayor Ross and Alderman Pittner. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a lot of different ideas kicked around at this alcohol meeting as to how we could help maintain the value of these licenses and yet open up that cap.
But is that really a legal question, or like and that, that's not a legal question. That is, if somebody, other jurisdiction has done it, how did they do it, right? It's not a legal question. We can open up the cap, right, Paul?
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just to provide more context, that's to the work of this committee, being as pro-growth, pro-investment, pro-entrepreneurship, but also maintaining the value of the current license holders has also been at the forefront of this committee. From day one, when we have a license
But
holder
again, is
on
that
our
a
committee.
legal
Depends how,
question?
I would look to the attorney, but the language is different within different municipalities on how a license is viewed. Whether it's property or whether it's a license. So again, I'm not an attorney, so don't take that to the bank. But again, also just to provide more context, and I know Alderman Padragula has been to some of these meetings, we've had license holders and we've given the opportunity to speak. We've given them the opportunity to be transparent with them, and they've come up and they've spoken about the process, and they've been very receptive to it and said, when this has been happened in the past, it was all pitchforks and torches and it was very behind closed doors, they felt, and they didn't have a seat at the table. They were very encouraged by the process. They were very encouraged by more license holders in the community, more competition. They just want to go make sure it's done in the right way so that, again, a value is preserved and the proverbial rug isn't pulled out from under them. Whether or not it's a legal question, I would say yes, because we're looking at rewriting an ordinance that defeases a property or devalues a property potentially of someone who's made that investment. But again, this committee, I stand by the work of this committee. We've tried to make it as inclusive as possible to the public, to anyone, any license holders that have come, not required per our hearings or our ordinances, our meetings. We've given them the opportunity at every meeting to come up and speak and give us feedback, and they've all given positive feedback on the work that's being done and stood behind it. So, and anybody that was at those meetings can disagree with me or if I got it wrong, but I'll hand it over to staff.
If I may. So I guess my largest concern is that there's going to be questions about takings that we're going to have to do research on. We're going to have to research legal precedent. We're going to have to determine what's defendable, what's not defendable. And even if we come up with something we think is the most reasonable option in the world, there may be license holders that still want to challenge that. So there's a lot of different options that are going to have to be weighed by contract counsel. They're going to have to research precedents. They're going to have to research case value, and they're going to have to rank and file what they think is the best option for the city with the least amount of risk. So I would say that there is a lot of legal research and consideration that has to be had, but we also don't want to have a lot of time spent on this committee chasing down different options if the council doesn't have the appetite to remove the cap at all. And so that's one of my largest concerns. I don't want the committee to be spending a lot of time researching this if it isn't something that the council wants that committee spending a lot of time researching. If the council decides it doesn't want the committee to spend time researching, amending that ordinance, and they want to just leave it as is, they could direct the committee on the same, and the committee can move on to the remainder of the ordinance as well, and we wouldn't invest that time there.
Steve?
Yeah, again, I don't mean to play amateur lawyer, but I think Carrie's right. This is primarily a public policy issue, but I think there's significant legal ramifications. I'm thinking specifically of a case from Connecticut, Kelo, for a taking of private property for a public purpose. The public purpose is economic development, allowing more entrepreneurship. I think you could easily make a Kelo argument. So, yeah, I think it is primarily policy, but it needs to have a very strong legal input at the beginning. And the lawyers may suggest ways that may reduce some of our anxiety about this. Maybe there's some clever ways of assuring fairness that we wouldn't know about.
Scott?
Alderman Pittner, in your process, did you talk about, obviously you came to the conclusion, you said today 3-1. Did you talk so that was about removing the cap. Did you talk at all about adjusting the cap or adjusting, like, because right now it's based on census number. Have you talked about anything like that to perhaps rather than eliminating, but rather to increase maybe gradually in order to reduce some of the fiscal impact or anything like that?
It has been discussed, but I think we'd run into the same kind of fallout, if you will, that there's the potential to devalue an asset of someone's. And the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, you still run into those issues. And what is the clearest, what is the best path forward? I don't know. If you adjust it by census numbers, I think it's 1 per 500 right now, 1,500, whatever it is within the ordinance. Do you just kick the proverbial can down the road that when Minot grows to another, then it's our grandkids, it's our kids' job to rehash this issue? It would be my opinion that if we're going to do it, let's just do it all the way and get it done with so that our community can move forward. And again, be as pro-growth, pro-investment, and pro-entrepreneurship as possible.
Mayor?
I'm gonna go to Kayla first. She's had her hand up for a while.
The only thing I wanted to let the council members know is that the committee, the member that voted against it was very concerned about getting public input from other license holders. We have allowed for public input if there were license holders in the audience at any meeting that we saw a license holder at. The other 3 members voted for it with the assumption and the knowledge that we would be having these public meetings, but we needed more information on and recommendations from council as to how to go about if we were to remove the cap and what that would look like, because it's hard to get opinions on a process that you don't know the process on how it's going to be removed. So it's the committee's full intention to have these meetings and have the public comment, have the license holders come in and partake in this, but we just thought as a whole that more information was needed to have those open meetings.
Carrie?
The city attorney, I don't think you're going to get an answer to your question. I think you're going to just have to wait to see if there's a majority vote and then take that as indication. I just want, like this, any law firm, they can go down rabbit holes, right? This could end up being a $500,000 bill, right? Is just please be very specific with them about, the scope and what it is the committee and the council want, because otherwise, it is going to be just a humongous legal bill. So, I think, the committee and the council has to really think, really hard about what exactly, not just being like, oh, just give us research on taking caps off. Well, $1 million later, here's your research kind of thing, so.
Okay. Lisa?
Mr. Mayor, I might stand alone tonight. I guess I've been doing that already, but I'm just going to say that I do have some concern on taking the caps off, and that is related to the value of that license. And, we've gone through a flood, and we've bought out hundreds of properties, and we bought those properties out at, a fair value. And I don't think that there's going to be an appetite in our community to buy out those licenses. So unless I'm misunderstanding that there would be another way to do that, I can't stand behind seeing tax dollars buying these out. And if that's the result of removing the caps, I have some concern. But again, I have not watched the committee meeting, so if there's been other discussion related to that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, there is. There has been, and I'll jump to you, Paul. There has been, and honestly, I'm all for that too. I voted to move that forward to the council, but you know, with the nuance of we're going to have the license holders here giving us input. We've had some with input, but it's really going to go down for me this road of we're going to get all the input. We're going to have the attorney do the research and provide us as much information as we can. The committee together is going to make a recommendation to council, and the council is going to have final word on it. Whether or not you're happy with the route that the committee is recommending on how to keep that value of those full liquor licenses out there. So that's a concern of mine, and it's important, I think, for the entire committee that we do, once we get a document together, we get that out to the license holders and we get them into the council chambers and we listen and we have that discussion at that time. But Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, no one in the committee has suggested buying back licenses. No one's suggested spending $500,000 on this. I mean, again, there's a level of, we don't know what we don't know. So we got to find out.
Yeah.
And we can sit here and all put our heads together that have never gone through this process before and try to come up with an idea, or we can get someone tasked, a professional, to go down this rabbit hole for us and help us guide through this process. But again, yeah, I mean, but why would we as a committee, and that was that, and then back to Michaela's point, the committee member that voted against it today was, I think we should have public input. Well, what do you want to have public input on? You want us to remove the cap? Well, how are you going to do it? We don't know. It doesn't make any sense. There's a cart and there's a horse, and right now we're trying to get the cart behind the horse so that we can get it to council with all of the facts in place. So I will support this tonight because that committee is really, we're not equipped to do that. We're not equipped to provide a product or a recommendation to this council without it. So again, we can sit here and say we're going to buy them back. No one's saying that. No one has said it. No one said that we're going to spend $500,000 on legal bills. We're going to be stewards of taxpayer dollars throughout this process. We're going to be stewards of the current license holders and stewards of the community's future throughout this process, just like the committee has attested that they will be. So again, we want the input. We want everyone to be involved, but we need to have some information to share with them before we get input. So that's why I'm going to vote in favor of this.
I'm voting in favor of it too. I mean, I think it is important to have this research. It's, we could be a very generous community, and if another North Dakota city contemplates this in the future, share that legal research with them. Because I think this is a topic that many communities talk about, and whether or not we move forward with it or not, again, we don't know what we don't know. And so, it has to, and instead of just keeping on kicking it, talking about this on a philosophical or abstract level, this will, give some, hopefully concrete sort of suggestions to the governing body to contemplate and to ask the public for input on.
We have a motion and a second.
Oh, wait, Scott has his finger up.
Go ahead,
Or his
Scott.
pen.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a quick comment, and I went back and forth on this, but I will vote in favor of this tonight because we need to honor and respect the license holders and the value that they have in this, but also we have to begin the process of kind of undoing a historical wrong, which is a government putting a limit on private business. So there's not an easy path to that, and changing things in a hard way sometimes can cost money, and that's what we're investing in tonight. And I agree with Alderwoman Evans' suggestion that perhaps we have to ensure that it doesn't end up to be too much. But I think that moving forward, we have to bring in the help that this committee has asked for and the work and honor the work that they've done.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson,
No.
Padragula,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 7.4 on the agenda, the traffic building demolition recommendation. What are the wishes of the council?
So moved.
I have a motion by Paul. Is there a second? Second by Lisa. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passes. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, that's personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to address the council to step forward and address the council.
Leif Snyder, Minot resident. Mayor Ross, I wanted to thank you for your most recent, not most recent, but I think it was your April blog post in which you said, be an active participant in the campaign process. And by that, I don't mean conducting your entire campaign from behind a computer screen. Being on one of those candidates, was that a dig? I mean, I appreciate good sarcasm and some banter. That's fine by me. If it was towards me, I don't know. More than one of you sitting at the dais has referenced citizens as keyboard warriors in the past. Is what it is, I guess. However, you do have some good advice. It is good to get outside your comfort zone, and I'm going to ask that of you later. And here's why. I don't like groupthink. I question things. You guys all know that. And I take it as a compliment when, Lisa, you said I always am prepared and I'm always up to speed when it comes to meetings. Councilman Pittner, you said I'm a hard citizen to impress. I don't think that's a bad thing. What I don't like about groupthink, here are some examples. Chamber EDC endorses the TIF for the Big M building. That's quite a while ago, Mr. Burlingame. I don't think you were on the council then. But how was the vote? 7-0 it passed, right? Epic runs into financial issues, so it's amended. Passed again, 7-0, right? Unanimous. Reading the Renaissance Board approval meeting minutes, there was discussion about a double facade grant for the M building before they had even applied for it. It's supposed to be a first come, first served program. That approved 7-0 from this council. Recently, there was an extension asked for out of Epic for that, right? 7-0 it passed. I do question things. Chamber EDC sends a letter endorsing the tracks TIF. You recall what that vote was? 7-0. Now, when I question things and digging into how things work with the whole tracks development, the master development agreement, I was wondering who was going to hold the liquor license for the concerts held out there. I didn't run into anybody at the grocery store, Mr. Pittner, but I did ask the people from Minot. I never got a response. You guys as a body approved the liquor license for M&S concessions at the tracks before the walls were up, 7-0. They asked for an extension. You approved it, 7-0. They asked for a second extension, 7-0. Now, it's good to get outside your comfort zone. Knowing a thing or two about how the Phase 2 TIF at the tracks is set up, or according to the Master Development Agreement. If the vote were held tonight, how would you guys vote on Phase 2? I would vote no. You have the chance right now, you can tell the citizens and get out of your comfort zone how you would vote. That's all I got.
Now is an opportunity for those who wish to address the council to step forward at this time. Seeing none, we will move on to item, whoop. Okay.
Jerry McLaughlin from the spot. I just had one question, I guess. I know that y'all had the alcohol rewrite people meeting, and I reached out to all the alcohol holders that I know today. Nobody has talked to anybody. So I'm not sure who you were talking to that was fine with y'all lifting the caps, and I guess that'd be my question. Who was fine with lifting the caps, and who have y'all talked to?
So the owner of Lamplighter Lounge, John, was here, as well as Tony Mueller from
Okay.
Sports on Top. They
So
were
just
here.
those
and
two? You
Those
did?
two, they attended the meetings and they were invited to
Have
speak.
y'all reached out to anybody else? Because none of us even knew about, I didn't know if this vote tonight until somebody else called me and told me about it. So I guess that's the only question. I know that part of it's my job to be involved in stuff, but not everybody knows about all the meetings going on or when they are or what the agenda is for them. I guess that's the only question I have is just addressing council, is I don't have a problem with stuff as long as we're informed and we're in part of the discussion. I think that's reasonable.
So, no, I agree with you, Sherry. And Michaela, there's a process for, on the city website, being alerted when agendas come out, correct?
Yeah, so right now we're in the middle of two softwares. Same platform, two softwares, and due to privacy rights, we can't transfer over the Notify Me. I'm hopefully gonna be working with the PIO's office tomorrow afternoon when our new portal, public portal goes up. I will state that between the two, I have posted agendas in both so that anyone who has subscribed to Notify Me got word of any meetings, and these are publicly posted, appointed committee meetings. I will state that there'll be a Facebook post. The media will get there so that they're notified. It's as simple as hitting, once you get to the new board portal, hitting subscribe. You're gonna put in your email address and you're gonna list, there's gonna be a list there. And you're just gonna click what you wanna find out. So if you wanna know when council meetings are, you'll know when council meetings are. Unfortunately, the Alcohol Ordinance Committee is an appointed committee by the mayor, so it's under appointed committees. So anytime that there's an
Those are
appointed
usually during the
committee.
day, aren't they?
But it
When people are
was
working?
on, I'm on the website, it's on the front page with the agendas.
Correct, and the calendar invites are on there too. We are the second and fourth Monday of every month at 1 o'clock, unless due to this month with the holiday and some staffing issues with all the budget meetings at the beginning. We only met once, which was today, and so our next meeting will be June 13th at 1 p.m. And it will go until.
And the 1 p.m.
I was just surprised, but like I said, this is something that affects some of the owners huge, that there was no reach out, so that did surprise me.
Yep, and the 1 p.m. was actually to accommodate the two license holders that are on the committee.
A lot of us work, yeah.
Yep. So again, that was their request to accommodate, so.
Final call for anybody who wishes to step forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and city staff. Hey, it's John Lacknick again. Just comment on same thing Sherry's talking about. It's one thing to say that there's license holders that are okay with taking the cap off when there's two present instead of the 29, I believe, full license holders in Minot. I don't disagree that we need to do a lot of work on it in many ways. But I think there's a reasonable way forward, and if there's anybody wondering, my license is for sale for $500,000. So to anybody that might be pulling strings of the city to either get licenses through the cap coming off or other means, they can contact me directly. Just make that publicly known. In addition, I just wanted to say thank you for taking your time tonight to have the hearing, but hopefully it won't slip up again because we'll be right back in front of you for another suspension revocation hearing that you confirmed 6 violations, given the way the ordinances are written. And to Alderwoman Evans' point, when all 6 violations are found at the same time, that sliding scale or the hierarchy of the scale doesn't work for such a case like me. So I just wanted to point that out to Alderman Pittner as he goes through the liquor license committee. If we could figure out a way to handle the violations in such a way that should there be another disagreement or fact that we won't be having somebody right back up within 24 months for another technical violation that didn't degrade public health and safety.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members. Just wanted to, I guess, piggyback on what was just said. Councilman Pittner, this is the third liquor license owner that would say no to a cap increase. I know you had the 2 at the meeting. You've got 3 here that don't want to see that happen. Again, as you just heard the gentleman say, $500,000 is what they're going for right now. That is an asset that goes with my business. If the city were to go towards the let's remove the cap, I would hope that there would be some sort of compensation buying us out. And if there's 20-something liquor license holders and we all want $500,000, that's going to be a substantial amount that the city's going to have to pay. And I don't think the tax holders are going to be real happy about that. Thank you.
Final call for anybody who wishes to address the council. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 9 on the agenda, miscellaneous and discussion items, the GIS map. Mr. Meyer, the floor is yours.
Good evening, members of, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight I want to walk you through 2 maps that our department in engineering puts together to help the public navigate some of the construction projects and traffic impacts that we have. We're off to a busy start here in Minot. Excuse me. We had a very nice spring, so we're off to a good start here in April and into May and now almost June. So just directing you to our homepage here at the city of Minot to get to these maps. Right on the homepage, if you go to GIS, this takes you to our Minot GeoHub, where you can get to all kinds of maps and information that the city of Minot produces. You'll see 2 maps here right on our homepage. One of them is called the Minot Construction Projects 2024. The other is the Traffic Impact app. I'll walk you through this one here first, the Minot Construction Projects 2024 map. We put this map together just to show all of the different projects that we have going on around Minot. So if you zoom out, maybe not that far out, but if you zoom out and take a look, you can see all the different colored projects that we have going around town. Each color represents a different type of project. So the stars are traffic signals. You can see the flood control projects, chip seals and sidewalk and different projects that we have. If you zoom into them and click on them, and I'll just click on one of my projects here in engineering, it brings up some of the information about the project. So if you're curious on what's going on maybe one of the routes that you take to and from work or in your neighborhood, you can click on one of the colored lines and get some information about it. So if you look here, it's one of the street improvements. It is the 2024 Street Seal Project. It lists the contractor who is going to do the work, when the project is supposed to be completed, and our project manager, name, contact information, phone and email, and then the status of the project. So if you needed to get a hold of the city, had a question about it, you could phone or email that individual. We also have that broken down by different categories. So if you wanted to look at just the street projects that are happening within the city of Minot, or if you're curious about the different utility projects that are happening in Minot or flood protection, we have those broken down as well, so you can kind of filter the list. So different projects, depending on their timelines, might have different information listed. So if you click on a project and there's not very much information there, maybe it just got awarded by the city council, so we don't have all the details in there yet. So as the projects take or change throughout the construction season, that information will change as well. If you go back to the GeoHub page and you click on the Traffic Impact app, This map shows the different road closures, lane closures, and detours around the city of Minot. If you zoom in here, here's our Burdick and Broadway signal project. The blue indicates the lane closures that we have, kind of the same feel as the construction map. It gives the project name, who's doing the work, and the anticipated start and end dates, and then the type of traffic impact. So in this case, it's a lane closure. As a different example, if you come up here, you can see the different detour routes associated with the closures on Railway Avenue for the MI5 flood control project. So these are just a couple of tools that we put together to help our citizens navigate the different impacts that we have throughout the community. We have a lot of work going on in the city of Minot. This year is very busy for us. We have well over $20 million in construction activity ongoing right now, over $8 million in street maintenance. Our utility projects is probably somewhere over $10 million, and of course our very large and impactful flood control project that we have ongoing, trying to provide flood protection to our citizens. So you combine all these projects together and all the different impacts that we have, it can make quite a challenge for our citizens to get around in the community. We understand that, we empathize with that, and that's why we put some of these project maps together to try to help communicate some of those impacts. So, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, or if any of the council has any feedback or changes they'd like to see, or any additional maps or information they'd like us to put together, I'd welcome any of that feedback.
Any feedback? Steve?
I really like this. I've been using it more and more each week. The one thing I noticed is there was a project in particular I was looking at from last year that wasn't completed, and it was on there last year, but it's not on here. It wasn't on here a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at it. That was the 7th Street, or 7th Avenue Northwest Water Main Project. It had disappeared for some reason.
Yeah, it might have been some of the carryover work, and someone might have taken it off or whatnot. We'll have to have that added back.
But other than that, it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As somebody who lives in there, it's
Carrie.
pretty much done. I mean, my street's the only one that's not done. So, I mean, it's for all intents and purposes, except paving my street, is done.
This was a month ago.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know if that's why it was taken off, but
Sure.
the water mains have definitely been replaced. Now it's just the street and, like the
I know.
aesthetics.
Kayla?
Okay, I'm talking far too much than I normally like to in a meeting, but Lance, I think it's important to publicly state that if you click on a project, not every contact will be a City of Minot employee, correct? And if it's not a City of Minot employee, they would still be the contact if you have an issue for the problem of that project or questions, correct?
On our, Michaela, on our City of Minot project map, we put City of Minot contacts on there. We want to be the point of contact on those.
I thought I had saw a few.
I think maybe on a couple of the traffic impacts, we might have some contractors listed. But on the City of Minot project map, we want to be the contact because we're consistent on getting back to somebody. So we want to make sure that we're the clearinghouse for any communication back to contractors.
Sorry about that. I thought I had seen maybe another engineering company or a contractor that
Sure.
was a contact information.
Scott?
Mr. Meyer, are the, and again, I'm sorry, I can't zoom in and I don't have it open. Are the safe route to school projects or the sidewalk projects, are they included in this as
They
well?
are, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you, Lance. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Moving on to item number 10, liaison reports. Carrie?
Just the library. Summer programming has been announced, so if you and your youngins are looking for things to do this summer, take a look at their website or Facebook page. There's a lot of great stuff for that. The library committee will be holding a special meeting next Friday to exclusively talk about the budget, because our meeting last week went long, and so we didn't want to short the budget discussion. So we're having a special meeting next Friday. That's all I got.
Lisa?
Let's see, on April 18th, I attended the City County Park School Liaison Committee meeting, and Marissa Hammond from Ward County discussed the primary election, and then we had an update on the construction of Minot North High School. I think that a lot of us up here attended the Nuclear Triad Symposium, and I know it's been discussed before, but just another shout out to the Task Force 21 folks that put that on. I thought it was very well organized, very informational, and so I'm glad that we had that opportunity in Minot. On April 25th, I took part in the Souris Basin Planning Council Loan Review Committee. And coming up this week on the 22nd, I will be attending the first Dakota College at Botno Minot campus policy meeting. So they put together a board of individuals from around the community that they'll kind of just pose questions to, I guess. We haven't seen the agenda, so I don't know what to anticipate. And then Central Dakota MPO will meet this week on the 23rd.
I forgot, because I forgot I was your alternate last month. I did fill in for Alderwoman Olson for the MPO last month policy meeting, and we voted to hire the first executive director for the MPO. So that's good. That's going to get things really going. So good news there.
Steve.
Thank you. In terms of the Emergency Resource Council, there wasn't anything significant. In terms of the Ward County Planning Commission, where Carrie and I both serve, there was a very heated discussion, a poignant decision, individual asking for a variance on a zoning code violation. And it was very sad, but we turned them down. We didn't give them a variance. And I guess the original fault was they didn't get a building permit. This was out in the county. But given what happened with the Mr. Lacaduck and liquor license permit, and these things have come before the council, I think the message is very clear to the public. If you're going to be doing anything major, you really need to get a permit for it and check to make sure you're in compliance. This individual had replaced a trailer home with one that was larger, and it was encroaching. The problem was it was encroaching on public property, so we couldn't exactly give away public property to, and they admitted to a whole cascade of errors, and they relied on rumor, they relied on what they were told by contractors, and they did not rely on government officials, which I think you really need to be doing when you're doing something that has major consequences, such as building a house or selling liquor. So that was a noteworthy decision we made in terms of variances, and I think a broader lesson. There were two other things I wanted to mention, which are a cross between liaison and just miscellaneous and discussion items. One of them was last Wednesday on the 15th. I spent an hour and a half at the fire station at the airport getting briefed on the new $800,000 fire truck and how it's used and fire operations, and I wanted to publicly thank the crew that was on duty there for helping me learn a lot. I also wanted to single out several individuals because they spent more time with me and gave me more of an insight. The first was was Battalion Chief Jason Babinchuk, who was in charge of the whole tour and presentation and provided his expert level, chief's level perspective on these things. The second person I wanted to single out was Captain Justin Burgess, who was the captain of the shift of the crew out there. Gave lots of information about how the truck would be used and general firefighting practices, which was a very, very enlightening discussion. Then I wanted to thank, in particular, senior firefighter Rob Rohrbaugh, who was the coach and the mentor, and I called him the guru, although he objected to that, of the new fire truck. He was instrumental in showing me the paces and explaining what went in each compartment and how things would be used and the advantages and disadvantages of this versus other trucks. He really was taking it seriously, and he was in charge of the orientation of the other firefighters. And last but certainly not least was our ace mechanic, Travis Seaford, a former firefighter who rode along with us. They took me out on the taxiway or the parking apron to show me the capabilities of the truck. And between the two of them, they were still struggling to figure out what some of the controls were and what they meant. And I was a little impatient, to be honest with you. It was going to take so long to get the fire truck operational and online. But now I had changed my mind completely. It's such a complicated piece of equipment. And the public needs to know this. Not only does it cost a great deal of money, but it's a very complex piece of equipment. Even an ace mechanic and a veteran firefighter with 20-plus years of service, they are really struggling to master this thing. Everything is electronically controlled. Everything is computer-guided. It's a very fancy piece of equipment. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to learn how to use effectively and to maintain. But it's first class as far as I can tell. So I really wanted to thank them for that exposure to this vehicle and how it's going to be used. Really appreciate their education. The final thing I wanted to note, it also had to do with Lance's comment about projects. There was a project on 7th Avenue Northwest that I was concerned about that's resulted in a lot of disruptions, a water main replacement project to the neighborhood. I've received complaints about it and I've personally been very, very distressed by what I've seen. And I've talked about it with our staff, in particular with Tom Joyce, the Assistant City Manager, and I wanted to note this because it's a really important thing. If you'll permit me to read a sentence from a letter he's planning on sending to all the people in the neighborhood who have been affected. Quote, "The city realizes that you and your neighbors have had to deal with incomplete sidewalks, muddy roads, and other inconveniences throughout the winter months, and now dust, noise, and road closures for another few weeks as they finish up. Your patience throughout this project is greatly appreciated, and the city apologizes for the inconveniences you've endured." Close quote. In all the years I've served on the council, I've never seen a city official make such a public and clear apology to citizens for a construction project or some sort of improvement project. Sometimes things have been mentioned at council meetings, things have certainly been privately conveyed over the telephone to individuals or in emails, but I've never seen this kind of mass assumption of communication, an assumption of responsibility, an explanation of what happened and why it happened. And I've been pushing staff for years to be more accountable, and I think this is an excellent example of that. So I publicly wanted to commend Mr. Joyce and also his supervisor, our city manager, for this very public and I think much needed explanation to people and why their street was disrupted, and an apology for the city's role in it. There were some extenuating circumstances, but as Lance said, the buck stops with us. And I think it's really critical that when we take responsibility, and when we do so, that it be recognized publicly. So I really appreciate
And the
the
letter came
efforts.
to our mailboxes today.
Good, thank you. You're one of the ones affected.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's an
I
understatement.
wasn't complaining though, so.
Well, we should be upset about things that aren't done on time. Anyway,
You
so
know
I
what?
really,
We got new water, like, you know, what I've tried to tell my neighbors is, and Lance saw the picture of it, right? What they removed from our street, like, I can't believe we were drinking water out of that.
Right.
So, you know, the progress is costly, like
Right.
both time-wise, resource-wise. It's a minor inconvenience for having now, you know, a water main on my street that is gonna deliver clean water for years to
you're
come.
correct, it is a major and much-needed improvement, but for me, the process of taking responsibility and making
Yeah,
amends
no,
counts
that's
too.
wonderful, yep.
So I appreciate it very much.
Moving on with the liaison reports, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My last Renaissance Zone Committee meeting, we were presented with some information on some possible Renaissance Zone applications coming forward, as well as just some more clarification on the moving of blocks to some on North Broadway to spur some investment in those areas. Visit Minot Board meeting was held last week. Again, Visit Minot continues good work. Some of our events have grown, some of our youth sports events. I'll cite Minot Fast Pitch, Girls Fast Pitch Association, Thor Nelson, all the work that he's done there. He's actually having to turn away dozens of Canadian teams from entering the tournaments because we don't have the capacity to actually house these teams that want to come and participate and be in our community and spend 2-3 days here. So again, good work there. As well as earlier today, the alcohol ordinance rewrite committee. Obviously, we saw some of that, the product of that on our agenda tonight, and just another bit of informational tidbit of information during one of our first meetings. We looked back at the last about 9 sales of liquor licenses, and the average price sold was about $135,000, not 500. So just wanted to put that out there.
How much was it?
About $135,000 was the average, and those are all approved by the city council when they transfer. So that's why we have that information. So.
Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I participated in the Liaison Committee and the Task Force 21 Symposium and the MPO. They've all been covered. I yield the rest of my time.
Scott?
Wow, I don't know how to even do that, but I am going to actually steal
It's
from-
easy, just yield your time. No, I'm just kidding, Scott.
I know how, it doesn't mean I'm going to. I actually want to steal a little bit from what Alderwoman Olson and then Alderman Pratagula said. First off, I did attend the Nuclear Triad Symposium, or at least most of it until I got called out, and wonderful event, so much information. Definitely had a couple of moments of, you know, hey, this is pretty amazing to be able to sit here and, you know, a few miles from my home and listen to the quality of speakers talking about the important things like, you know, nuclear weapons and stuff like that, and also looking at the impact that that has on the people that live in within this community. So I thought that was a fantastic event. I also, kind of on a side note, did attend the Minot Public, sorry, what was it called? The auction, the impound auction, that's the word I was looking for. And just the professionalism that goes into getting that event set up, getting the vehicles ready, separating out the equipment or the items within the vehicles, getting an idea of what it is. I couldn't stay super long. I really had my heart set on an ARF truck, but my wife wouldn't let me buy it, so I had to leave.
It went for 20 grand.
20 grand?
Wow.
Really?
Quadrigula bought it.
Yeah.
I wish.
Mrs. Pittner did. It's an early Father's Day gift.
Heart set on that, but Kim wouldn't go for it, so it's really on her. But I just really want to applaud the staff that put in all the hard work on doing that. And I was also glad to see that as that was happening, the Public Works was doing an electronics recycling event and seeing vehicles coming through that as well. So just some of those behind the scenes, maybe a lot of people don't get to see, but just the hard work and professionalism done by our city staff. And I'd like to just make public note of that.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Good meeting.